If you aspire to become the very most that you can become in this lifetime, and you live with deep spiritual and moral ambition, your heart aches at how destructive our current society is, and you aspire to live your life in service to the creation of something more beautiful in this world, then this video is going to be one of the most important videos you could ever watch, because I'm going to be outlining the 8 stages of human soul development as articulated by psychologist Bill Plotkin in his book right here, Nature and the Human Soul. And this video, or this book, is so good. I think it's one of the most important books ever written, with one of the main premises being of the book that our current society, our current human society, with its ego-centric emphasis on material gain, aggressive pursuit of social status, luxury, comfort, competition, rather than cooperation, destruction of nature, and pursuit of profit, is, in Bill Plotkin's eyes, a psychologically early adolescent stage of development, representing the 3rd stage out of 8 on his model. And he articulates that the reason that our world is in grave danger currently, with mass ecological destruction taking place, severe wealth inequality, billions living in poverty with constant wars and genocides and rising authoritarianism taking place, is because humanity as a whole, as a collective, has stalled or has been arrested in its development at an early adolescent stage. And that the path to a more mature, harmonious, and beautiful human society is inseparable from the development and maturation of the human species. So if you consider yourself to be a visionary, someone who aspires to be the very most that you can be for yourself, for others, and for the world at large, you're going to want to buckle up for this journey in today's video, because through these 8 stages of soul-centric human development, I am going to be planting so many seeds in the garden of your consciousness today, seeds that will give you the insights and the understanding needed to foster your own development as a human, but also seeds of inspiration that will fuel you to live your life as a true gift in the world. Like, imagine being on your deathbed, looking back and having no regrets because you gave all of yourself. You poured your entire heart and soul into your life, and you contributed to making a difference in this world. And these seeds that I hope, through taking action in the world and following the calling of your own soul, will bear fruit that makes the world more beautiful, whole, and complete because you are in it. So this video here is going to be an explanation of Bill Plotkin's model of development as described in this book here. And throughout this journey that we'll be taking today, I'll be talking a bit about my own life as a journey through these stages, but I'll also be making numerous comments about society, critiques of our current institutions, and my hope is through all of this is that you have a more clear understanding of how to embody your soul, which is your deepest nature, your truest essence, more in your life, but also having a more clear vision of what the more beautiful world looks like if humans actually were to mature and develop in the way that we were supposed to, because that world, that more beautiful world, looks so much different than it currently exists now. So if you're down for that, you want to go on a human, individual, and collective journey, then buckle up for the next couple hours or so. And just one more shout out to Bill Plotkin. You should look him up. His books are fantastic. I have a couple other books up here by him and a few other books by Charles Eisenstein that is a similar domain, but I give all the credit to Bill Plotkin here today. The outline or the model I'll be describing comes directly from this book, and this book just lit a fire in my heart. It was essentially, this book is essentially a manifesto for both individual and cultural transformation, so I'm just going to be commenting on that today, taking you on a journey through this model. But at the end of the day, this does not come from me. It comes from Bill Plotkin, so all of the credit to Bill Plotkin. And so I first want to say, before we get started here, is that this model of human development I'm going to be sharing today, that again comes from that book, Nature and the Human Soul, it's significantly different from the other models of human development I've shared on this channel. I have a popular video on my channel about Ken Wilber's model of conscious development, and while there are a lot of similarities between the various models of human development that are out there, Bill Plotkin's model is different because this model is specifically about the stages of human soul development, while many other models out there are models of cognitive awareness or spiritual awareness, or even stages of cultural values, which is what spiral dynamics is about, if you're familiar with spiral dynamics. But this model is about how the human soul is meant to unfold and unravel across the lifespan. And this distinction is very important and very crucial, because when I say soul, I mean something very specific by that. And I have a whole long video on my channel actually about what the soul is, in a video that I created last week, which you can check out if you want the long explanation of what soul is. It's a whole 41 minute video or so that I created that just explains what soul is, because it's kind of a complex term that can have a lot of different meanings depending on who you hear it from. But in essence, soul, in Bill Plotkin's terminology, is one's psychoecological niche within the Earth community, within the entire web of life. So really, soul is referring to one's ultimate place of belonging in the world. So, for example, it is in the soul of a bee, because it's completely natural to the bee to pollinate, and without it, entire ecosystems would collapse. It is in the soul of a mycelial network to connect the roots of the forest, silently distributing nutrients to the trees that need them most, which we all know trees play a critical role for a lot of reasons in the larger web of life. And it is also in the soul of a wolf pack to regulate the deer population, which allows the riverbanks to regenerate and lots more vegetation to grow. And so, from this way of viewing soul, every being, when fulfilling its soul, serves the whole in ways that the individual creature could never ever comprehend on its own. I mean, if you go out in nature and you spend a good amount of time there in nature, and I'm talking deep nature, you kind of begin to see how everything perfectly fits together and is intimately interwoven and interconnected with each other. Everything in nature depends on each other. And what's happened with humans is that we have become, for the most part, because our species is experiencing arrested development in early adolescence, is that we have become divorced from our own souls. And when we become divorced from our own souls, we are not ensouling the earth, contributing to the larger fabric of life. And thus, we become pathological, destructive to the whole web of life, in a similar way that cancer in the human body is when pathological cells, rogue cells who have gone on to serve their own agenda and not the agenda of the whole, begin replicating in mass, which eventually goes on to destroy the whole organism if the cancer is not stopped. And we can very much see that in all the ways that humans are profoundly hurting the environment and each other through all of the war and all the genocide and greedy wealth hoarding that is taking place. And what's interesting about us humans is that we are actually the only species on the entire planet who is even capable at all of becoming divorced from our own soul. Because if you look at any other species or any other animal in nature, it just kind of does its thing naturally. It naturally takes its ecological niche without any conscious thought. And the reason that us humans are the only species capable of becoming divorced from our own souls is because we have this thing called an ego. And childhood and early adolescence is this time in which this ego is supposed to be developing. But if the human maturation process unfolds properly, which it is not in our society, as one grows into a true adult, the ego stops leading and completely governing one's life and starts to take a back seat and become the servant to soul, which is your deepest nature, where your deepest nature, the unique form of love and goodness you have to offer to life, comes to fruition. And so what I mean by ego is simply just really our conscious sense of self. It's the part of you that knows your name and your story and what you are and what you're not, what you believe is true and what you don't believe is true. It is really a whole constellation of beliefs and a way of perception, a way of seeing the world, and also, somatic habits that have become ingrained in us as well. And Plotkin describes the ego as both humanity's greatest treasure and also our deepest curse. The ego is a gift in the sense that it's the instrument through which the universe, the earth, because us humans, we literally are the earth having come alive, we're the universe having come alive. The ego is the instrument through which the universe can come to know itself. The ego allows us to know that we know. No other creature gets to do that. A wolf lives its soul perfectly, but will never know that it does. It will never feel the awe of recognizing its own place in the web. It will never weep at the beauty that it is to exist and be alive. The ego is what gives us that capacity, the capacity to witness, to reflect and kind of like take a step back and be like, oh my God, like I exist. Holy fuck, this is what I am. I'm alive. And there's a beautiful quote by Thomas Berry that I want to read to you that describes how much of a gift it is to have an ego. And the quote goes like this: "A universe is not a universe until humans are present. You couldn't have a universe without humans. It would have no meaning. It would exist merely physically, which is hardly to exist at all. What it needs to exist is a consciousness of community. The human, in a sense, brings the universe to itself. The human is the being through which the universe is fulfilled. So, humans have a profound cosmological role. Human consciousness provides a way in which the universe can reflect on itself and celebrate itself in a special mode of conscious self-awareness." And we might say that the special mode of conscious self-awareness is ego awareness, because it is ego consciousness that is able to separate itself from reality itself and inhabit a conceptual, keyword conceptual, because conceptual means concept and not real, realm that can reflect, abstract, and construct a sense of self and world out of language and concepts and stories. And so, right, the ego is a gift because it allows us to know that we know. It allows the universe and the earth to know itself, to know that we exist. But this very same instrument can also construct a self that has absolutely nothing to do with your own soul, and then it will believe it completely. The ego can build a version of you assembled entirely out of your parents' expectations, your culture's values, your wounds, your survival strategies, and you will walk around fully convinced that this fabricated self, this false self, is who you actually are. And you might live your entire life that way. Most people do live their entire lives that way. And then you'll wonder why it feels so hollow. You'll wonder why there's this quiet ache beneath everything, even when life looks fine on the surface. So the ego is the one instrument capable of recognizing soul, and also the one instrument capable of perfectly obscuring the soul as well. It can be the window to soul, or it can be the wall that blocks out soul, and which one it becomes depends entirely on whether a person undergoes the developmental journey through the 8 stages that Bill Plotkin has mapped out. So whether the ego is matured enough to open itself, to release its grip on its constructed identity, to turn towards the deeper depths of itself, and to subordinate itself to something truer. That's the whole path. That's the path to soul, is the ego maturing and releasing its stranglehold on the psyche so that soul can come through. And that's what these 8 stages are really about at the end of the day. It's not about getting rid of the ego, because we need it. We can never, ever, ever be without it. But it's really about maturing the ego to a point where it can do the one thing it was always meant to do, which is become a vessel for the soul's expression into the world. Which really, the way I think of soul is that soul is also your unique contribution. It's your unique way of giving love, giving a gift to the earth community, to the larger fabric of life, based on your unique interests, talents, curiosities, joy points, and unique form of alchemized pain and suffering. It's unique to you. It's how spirit wants to descend and live through you and be an expression of love. And so we can also think of the embodiment of soul as a human's true adult form. And what we have to realize is that the egocentric pursuits that most people on earth are engaged in, the pursuit of more money at all costs, more status at all costs, more material comfort despite already having so much material comfort, is fundamentally an adolescent pursuit. It's teenage stuff. We live in a world where there are 40, 50, 60, 70, 80-year-old psychological teenagers running around, and these very people are running our world. They are our presidents, our governors, our business leaders, designing our systems from the top down that perpetrate an adolescent world. And that is why everything, fucking everything, is in danger. That is why human society is so sick. And if we were to be living in a truly adult human society, in a soul-aligned, nature-based culture, humans would truly be the heart-opened, visionary, imagineering stewards and caretakers of life that we are meant to be. We'd perhaps be the most extraordinary force of life on this planet. We'd be an ally to life rather than a threat to it. We would be tending ecosystems rather than strip mining them. We would be designing economies that mirror the reciprocity of a forest, not the logic of a cancer cell. We would live in a world where everyone feels so safe and so secure in their body, where no one is hoarding resources while others starve, because a soul-embodied adult cannot do that. A soul-embodied adult cannot hoard. It just wouldn't make sense anymore, because when you know viscerally in your bones that you are fundamentally at one with and interconnected with all of life, greed becomes incomprehensible. And when you know this knowing in your bones that you are the earth, our relationship with the land would be completely unrecognizable compared to what it is now. We wouldn't be treating the earth as a pile of raw materials to be extracted and converted into for profit. We would know that when we are poisoning a river, we are poisoning ourselves. We would know that when we are committing mass genocide on an entire population of people, that we are doing that to ourselves. When we are impoverishing millions, billions of humans, we are doing that to ourselves. When we are causing a sixth mass extinction, we are doing that to ourselves. We feel pain because of that, because we are the earth and all of earth is interconnected and interwoven intimately with each other. When everything is hurting, so are we. And I mean this literally. I don't just mean this metaphorically. Our communities would actually be communities in this world. Not just a collection of isolated individuals living behind locked doors, numbing out on Netflix, performing connection on social media, binge watching porn, and feeling profoundly alone. In a soul-centric culture, your community would know you, not just your persona, not just your curated self, not on an ego level, but the deep you, the soul that resides in the deep core of your being, because the entire culture in this more beautiful world would be oriented around helping each person uncover and offer their unique gift that their soul has to offer. Your neighbors wouldn't just be the people who happen to live near you. They would be people who witnessed the entire developmental process that you went through. There would be true adults and elders who would help you discover and embody your soul, who help you discover and find the gift that you are meant to give, which is your place of ultimate belonging in the world. Our approach to mental health would be completely radically different. We wouldn't be pathologizing what are really just initiatory crises. Someone in their late 20s or early 30s who feels like their life is falling apart, who doesn't know who they are anymore, who feels a pull towards something they can't name. Well, right now, our culture says that that person is depressed, and they prescribe mostly numbing medication. They tell them to do cognitive behavioral therapy and get back to being productive. And to Plotkin, the existential crisis is just your soul knocking on the door. And instead of opening the door, our mental health system is drugging them so they can't even hear the soul knocking anymore. And I'm not completely anti-medication. I mean, for some people, in some situations, it is genuinely life-saving. But we have to be honest about the fact that our mental health paradigm has no framework whatsoever for the idea that some forms of suffering are purposeful, and that some kinds of falling apart are not pathology, they are actually metamorphosis, and it may very well be the adolescent ego ready to be let go like a snake shedding its skin, or like a caterpillar dissolving into a chrysalis, so that the adult human soul can begin to come forth. And then, oh man, bro, education. Let's talk about education before we get going here. I don't want to rant for too long, but if you want to see arrested development institutionalized, if you want to see the pathological adolescent culture reproducing itself with ruthless efficiency, then look no further than our universities. Think about what college is actually designed to do in its current form. You take a young person who is at the most alive developmental threshold of their entire life, 18, 19, 20 years old, who should be burning with questions about who they are and what life is about and what they're here for. And instead you sit them in a lecture hall and you say, pick a major, pick a career track, make this decision at 18 years old when you have no idea who you are to specialize in this very narrow thing that you're going to do for the entire rest of your life. Become productive, become economically viable, get the degree so that you can pay off the debt we're about to bury you in, so that you can get the job and have the career that continues to bury the earth and the human world in even deeper debt. And I'm not saying all jobs, all careers, all teachings, everything that college leads you towards is bad. I am not saying that at all. There are many noble and morally ambitious, ways of going about this. There's amazing professors out there, there's some amazing teachings out there. But for the most part, and I know this from having gone through the university system, the university does not grow you into a true adult. It teaches you, for the most part, to become a functioning member of this adolescent world, this pathologically adolescent world. And this is just a tragedy. And I'm not saying there's nothing of value happening in universities. Of course there is. Of course there is. There are brilliant professors. There are genuine moments of intellectual and moral awakening. But I'm talking more about the structure. The underlying logic of the institution is oriented almost entirely towards producing workers for industrial growth society. It's an adolescent institution preparing people for adolescent lives. It answers the question, what should I do? How can I make a lot of money? Before the person has had any chance whatsoever to sit with the much deeper question of who am I really? And what is mine to do in this one beautiful and precious life? Like, literally imagine a culture where instead of going $100,000 into debt to memorize information that you'll forget by the moment the class is over, a young person spends those same years being asked by an entire community of soul-embodied elders. Who are you? Not just what do you do for a living, not what's your 5-year plan, but who are you at the deepest level? What image, what gift lives at the core of your being? What does the earth need from you specifically? And the whole community is invested in helping you answer that because they understand that your unique gift is something that the world itself needs. Like, literally, nature needs your soul in order to complete itself. Like, really let that sink in. And so, like, this type of world where we would actually be living in a world where, cities could breathe with the rhythm of nature without leaving a carbon footprint, where the struggle for self-survival has ceased, granting every individual equal opportunity to self-actualize, where exploiting people and the earth for profit has become alien, where work is a joyful expression of our unique self and innate creativity, where technology can serve both mankind and nature equally, isn't just a utopian vision. It's actually what is going to happen naturally as a critical mass of humans become truly soul embodied. And now that we've reached the point where I've actually gone on a ramble about like what this is all leading towards, I can actually start to begin to talk about the 8 stages, because this is the sequence through which your individual development will unfold, but also our collective cultural development as well. And as we proceed with the 8 stages, you'll likely find yourself resonating most strongly with a particular stage as your center of gravity. But also I want you to hold in mind the possibility that you have incomplete tasks from earlier stages of development that you need to go back to and fully integrate before you can move forward. And this is really important because, again, we don't want to fall into this mindset that these developmental models are just like ladders. They are not ladders. It's not like you can just check off stage 1, graduate to stage 2, and never look back. It's much more like a spiral. That's just kind of how development in general is. And I find that life has a way of circling you back to earlier developmental territory, sometimes gently and sometimes more loudly through crisis, because there's unfinished business there that your soul needs you to attend to before it will let you go deeper. So, to get us started here, I'll put a graphic of Bill Plotkin's model of soul-centric development here on the screen. And as you can see, there are 8 stages, and there's also a name of the transition between each stage to the next. And so we'll start here with stage 1, the innocent in the nest. And as you can see here on the screen, stage 1 begins at birth, when you are an infant, and this is associated with the east cardinal direction because the east is where the sun rises. And like the sun rising, you pop out of your mother's birth canal and you rise into the early morning of your life where you are a completely innocent and completely helpless being, completely relying on parental and community support. The nest for your survival, well-being, and development. And also, what I really like about Plotkin's model of development is that for each of the 8 stages, he lists a fundamental task that is necessary for getting through that particular stage of development, and he also lists a gift that each of the 8 stages provides for the larger community, which gets into the principle that a healthily functioning society needs a balanced number of members at each of the 8 stages. But for the case of stage 1, the innocent at the nest, the primary task is for the preservation of the baby's innocence. And eventually, as the child develops, around age 4 or so, age 5 or so, the formation of a healthy, intact, culturally viable ego. And it's precisely this innocence, this luminous presence that infants naturally exude that is the gift to the larger community. I mean, just think about how whenever you see a baby or a toddler, you can't help but to just marvel, to be in awe at how cute and how beautiful and how innocent the baby is. It's literally like the babies have this luminous presence, and it's like super nourishing to witness too. And I think the reason it's so nourishing is because infants have this capacity for radical presence within the moment. And I think this is something that we all long to experience deep down at our core. And because infants do not yet have an ego, and so they cannot look forwards into the future or backwards into the past, there is no sense of self yet. And so there's simply no place to be other than the present moment for the infant. And it's precisely this radical presence, this awe and revere and closeness with the now, that is the very foundation for maturing into a healthy, soul-centric adult later on in life, because it plants the seed of wonder into the infant. This is how Plotkin describes it, which is a capacity that is needed in order to authentically explore your own unique interests, curiosities, joy and aliveness points, etc., that is needed in order to live from your soul and live authentically throughout the lifespan. You just need to be able to follow your aliveness and be in the moment in order to do that. And what's tragic about our current society is that the way that most parents raise their kids is that they instill strict obedience, they implement all sorts of rules and very rigid beliefs very early on in the child's life, or they don't attune to their children enough, or they just let them indulge in screens way too much. And this is just absolutely detrimental to the child's development because, again, when a child is in the innocent at the nest stage, the nest needs to be a safe haven. The nest needs to be a space where the child is basking in a field of love generated by the parents and by the larger community, to the point that the child feels so safe and so secure and so securely attached to her caregivers, not just her caregivers, but also a secure attachment to life itself, to the point that she just naturally follows her joy, her wonder, what makes her come alive. And if she doesn't, if she develops all these contractions and blocks and closures in her body from internalizing that her environment is dangerous or doesn't meet her needs, she will never feel safe enough to follow her natural wonder and joy and awe that is naturally present in stage 1. And if she never feels safe and she doesn't get her needs met in this stage, the innocent at the nest, that wound will follow her throughout her whole entire life, potentially manifesting as a deep underlying anxiety, perhaps an unexplainable distrust of life itself and a distrust of one's natural emotions, impulses, and desires, which is one of the most common and most invisible epidemics in our world. People who have learned, before they even had language to describe it, that what they were naturally feel, that what they naturally feel and want and are drawn to is somehow wrong or dangerous or too much, and so they push it down. They learn to override their own instincts. They learn to distrust the very signals that their body and their psyche are sending them, and these are the same signals that would eventually lead them towards their soul if they were allowed to follow them later on in life. And so really, for the individual who experiences trauma at stage 1, which is a good amount of people, probably way more people than you realize, it's like someone took your inner compass and smashed it when you were 2 or 3 years old, and now you're 45 years old and you have no idea why you can't figure out what you want, why every decision feels so agonizing, why you keep looking to other people to tell you what to do with your life. So preserving innocence, awe, wonder, curiosity, and enchantment with the world is absolutely critical for a child's development at stage 1. And Bill Plotkin articulates this beautifully with his quote: "In your child's first 4 years, rather than emphasizing social conformity and predetermined lessons, You'll want to encourage and celebrate her natural curiosity, her dogged and multisensory exploration of everything in her world indoors and out, the pleasure she takes in her own flesh, her unrestrained laughter, her full-bodied emotionality, her unfettered sensuality, including her love of mud and the rain, in her thrill and wild movement. In her infancy and early childhood, say yes to her impulses in every way that you can. Reserve your use of no for those rare moments when you need to teach her real dangers. End quote. And I think about this a lot, actually, because if you look at a lot of adults in the world, this capacity for wonder and awe and curiosity and this like radical presence and attunement with the moment has been pretty much completely extinguished in them. And this is an absolute tragedy. The lives of most people on this earth, or at least in the quote-unquote developed world, it's not even really developed, at least on a psychological level, on an industrial level, sure, but the lives of most people are wake up, go to work, consume some social media, consume some Netflix, go to sleep, and then repeat. Like when I go to beautiful nature locations, such as a national park or a beautiful ocean lookout, there's people there that are just like on their phone. They're not even intaking the beauty that's in front of them because the capacity to be penetrated by life itself, to let the world actually into your being, has been extinguished. And so if you resonate with this at all, the capacity for wonder, awe, curiosity, and enchantment has been dimmed within you, I think perhaps it has in all of us to a degree, to be honest, but to restore this capacity, look to no other place than practices that have gotten you fully in touch with your innocence and natural aliveness in order to gain this capacity back. So set aside time to play, to do whatever the absolute fuck you feel like doing, and give yourself full permission to follow whatever authentic curiosities and desires are within you. This can be powerful to do before social occasions or really any event that is happening, because what you're being asked to do by returning to your natural aliveness and just oneness with the present moment is that you're being asked to completely drop expectations, to allow your natural, innocent, and wild self to come forward and be the driver of your experience. Of course, don't do anything that will get into serious trouble, but I also find that even when you allow yourself to be completely innocent and present and natural and wild and free, you don't do things that get you into serious trouble. Your body has a natural protective instinct, and so if you just let yourself be free, you won't get into things that get you into serious trouble. You mostly just do the things that bring you joy. Like really, that's all it is at the end of the day. You do the things that bring you joy and like meet your needs. If you just let yourself be natural, be who you are, you'll do things that bring you joy. You'll follow your highest excitement. Like life will be good if you just live relatively uninhibited and unrestrained, like I promise you. And I actually have a video on my channel from a couple years back in which I gave myself a set-aside time of 1 week, maybe it was 10 days actually, to do absolutely whatever the fuck I felt like doing. I filmed the video, spur of the moment in a pool, and I can leave a card on the screen to that video, but the practice was very powerful because when I followed what was naturally alive for me, not what I thought I should do, not what like my plan that my ego created thought I should do, when I was just one with the moment and followed my natural aliveness, I naturally got in touch with areas of life that I was neglecting or blocking out. And for me, that was socializing at this time. I remember during this practice, I reached out to a number of old friends and we hung out and we caught up and we had a great time and went to the kava bar and we got kava drunk and it was awesome. And a lot of other stuff happened too that was like really cool and really interesting. But it's almost like your body has this natural internal guidance system, and if we just follow it and give ourselves permission to follow it, we'll be living a good, great, harmonious, joyful, and soulful life. So highly recommend that practice. Like I'm dead serious. You've got to try doing absolutely nothing for like a week and just follow your aliveness. Like game changer, game changer, game changer. Meditation is also a powerful practice for being fully with what is. Also a creative art process such as stream of consciousness writing or painting or drawing or anything that has you freely expressing what is in your depths in the here and now is extremely important. Like not your ego thinking about it, but just the outpouring of creativity, of soul through you is very important. And what Bill Plotkin himself also recommends is apprenticing yourself to infants. He writes, hang out with infants. Why not sit at the feet of a true master? When he's awake, let your little teacher lead the way and play. He'll show you how to be as well as what to do. Get down on the carpet with him, just you and him. Let him teach you some games. When he falls asleep, you'll notice that he's no less a teacher of innocence. Take some deep breaths and immerse yourself in the miracle of his existence. Practice being present with his luminous presence and yours. So again, that radical presence, that innocence is the core gift and task of this stage. And what happens naturally as the child develops, again, you don't have to consciously try to do this, it just happens naturally, is when they're around 4 or 5 years old or so, is that the child's conscious sense of self begins to come online. Their sense of I comes online. They begin to develop an autobiographical narrative and memory, and they're ushered into the transition into the next stage of development, which Bill Plotkin calls this transition naming, where they transition into middle childhood, also known as stage 2, the explorer in the garden. And it is here in stage 2, off the backbone of a healthy stage 1, ideally, in which the child ideally learned that he was safe, that engaging his natural awe and joy and curiosity was safe, that his needs were met and all these things, that the child's sense of wonder just absolutely rips wild and free, and he becomes the explorer in the garden. And to put the graphic of the model on the screen here again, you can see that in stage 2, the child moves from being primarily in the east cardinal direction, which represents newness and freshness and innocence, because that is the direction the sun rises, and now moving to the south cardinal direction, but specifically in the southeast, which is the important because in the southeast, the sun here is climbing. It's not yet at its peak. It's gaining warmth. It's gaining momentum. The day that is their entire life is opening up and expanding, and that perfectly mirrors what's happening in the child. They're slowly stepping beyond the nest while still being held closely within it with this newly formed ego, this fresh sense of I. And their energy is building. It's reaching outward. They are warming into the world. Their morning of their life is no longer brand new. They're not the infant anymore, but the day is still young and wide open and shimmering with possibility. And the child feels that. They feel the bigness and the beauty and the mystery of the world stretching out in front of them, and they want to touch all of it. They want to explore all of it. And so the wonder that fuels the child's exploration of the world they inhabit is the core gift that stage 2, middle childhood, has to offer to the community. And to illuminate what I mean by this, the first memory that just appeared in my mind when I thought about it was, in this stage when I was around 5 or 6 years old, I had this friend who lived in this pretty nice house, and the house had this huge, spacious backyard, but beyond the backyard was the woods. And whenever I was there, me and my friend, we would dress up as superheroes. We would cosplay as Batman and Robin. We would imaginally act out certain scenarios and situations in our play, as children do, because their imagination and their wonder is just let fucking loose in this stage. And I remember as we were doing this, one time both of us got locked into a toy box, which was pretty scary in the moment, but also kind of funny and natural looking back, because all we were doing was playing and exploring. But yeah, the woods. And I remember the woods behind my friend's house. They were so ominous and they were so scary, but also deeply enchanting at the same time. I was scared to go back there, but also part of me really wanted to explore it. And one day, I suppose, when we were old enough and our parents trusted us enough, they let us go a little ways onto the path into the woods by ourselves, just me and my friend. And I remember feeling a lot of fear stepping into the woods, but also this exhilarating excitement at the same time. And I remember once I had gone a little ways into the woods with my friend, maybe just a few hundred yards or so. My fear subsided, and there was this enormous wave of awe and enchantment that just washed over me. Like I couldn't believe this was real, that I was experiencing this. And it was autumn and all of the leaves were yellow, and it was so beautiful. It was truly something like a nature mystical experience that I had there when I was just 6 years old. And it was from that moment on that I've had this enormous pull to and awe with nature, wanting to experience deep nature and wanting to explore all the beauties and profundities of the natural world. And so I say this story because it's this time of life that the child is meant to discover the enchantments of the natural world, both the nature in the outer world, but also the nature within the child itself through the ever-flowing cacophony of emotions, bodily sensations, and imaginal play. And that word discover is extremely key here, because discovery is what happens when a curious being is given freedom and time in a living world. It's what happened to me in those woods. Nobody taught me how to feel that awe. Nobody gave me a lesson plan on how to feel enchantment. I walked into the trees and the trees just did the rest. And that's the thing about the explorer in the garden, is that it doesn't need a rigid curriculum. The exploration itself is the curriculum. It's where the learning takes place, because the natural world is the most sophisticated, the most multisensory, and most endlessly fascinating classroom that has ever existed. All it asks is that you show up fully and pay attention. Plotkin articulates this beautifully in his quote, "In the garden, the child is a wide-eyed researcher, an incessant questioner of everything from the twinkling of stars to the properties of magnifying glasses and magnets, from the flight of butterflies and the power of lions to the meaning of kisses and touchdowns. He is gathering his world. Whatever he does, exploration is at the center of his activities. Whether he is at home, at school, playing outside, alone, or with friends, attending a social event, or accompanying a parent to work, he is a learner, a student, a novice, a disciple of the wondrous and the marvelous. In essence, he is an explorer," end quote. And really, I think the central power in this stage is exploration, allowing for moments of direct, unmediated contact between a young human, a young soul, and the living intelligence of the earth, both within the human world and beyond the human world. And those encounters do something to a child that no textbook ever could. They build a relationship. The child doesn't just learn about nature, the child falls in love with nature, and that love becomes a thread that, if it's allowed to persist, will eventually guide that person all the way down into the depths of their own soul, their own true nature, which is naturally at one with, interconnected to, and in a living relationship with nature, nature with a capital N itself. And I want to step aside for talking about stage 2 for a moment, and I just want to bring awareness to how much I'm emphasizing nature so far in this discussion. I mean, the book is called Nature and the Human Soul. And so from Plotkin's perspective, like I said, he believes that our society has become so pathological because we have become divorced from nature. With the development of modern industrial growth society, most humans have come to inhabit these freaking concrete jungles that are completely separate from nature. And when we get separated from nature itself, so do we get separated from our own souls, because our own soul is our deepest nature. You see how this connects? And so this entire model of development that I'm describing is what Bill Plotkin calls a full spectrum, nature-based model of human development. And essentially this model of development is emphasizing that each and every single human being is an indigenous member of the earth. We've lost touch with that. And essentially what we have to do is to heal ourselves and to heal our society by re-indigenizing ourselves and become one with nature again, to unite with our souls again. And this reframe for me, I'm being like, oh my God, the task is to re-indigenize myself, lit something up in me, because I had never really thought of myself consciously as an indigenous human. Right? I'm white and I grew up in white culture, and so I was kind of whitewashed and naturally separated from nature from birth, because the society is so deeply separated from nature. And so when Bill Plotkin is articulating and illuminating the fact that the task here is to re-indigenize ourselves and become one with nature again, something within that really lit up inside me. I'm like, holy fuck, this is so true. This feels so intuitive. And I had that insight early on when I was reading this book, which just caused me to voraciously go through the rest of the book. And yeah, I'm just excited to share the rest with you and just share what I've learned through this perspective, and also my life through this perspective, and comments on society. So anyways, that was a tangent. I'll get back to talking about stage 2 again. So anyways, in my articulating that nature is the backbone of progression through every stage in this model of development, I also don't want to get lost in only talking about enchantment with nature, because the full developmental task of stage 2 also includes learning cultural ways. And that second part matters enormously, because the child at this stage is building an ego. And that ego needs to become culturally functional. The child needs to learn to read, to write, to do basic math. The child needs to learn history and science and the great cosmological story of where we are. and how we got here. They need to learn how to cooperate with others, how to navigate social situations, how to share, how to communicate, how to understand the basic norms and values of the culture that they were born into. And so the center of gravity at this stage is sociocentric or group-centric, because the child is learning that they belong to a group, something that is larger than themselves, not just ecologically, but also culturally and socially. And that's beautiful, that's necessary. A child who only runs wild in the woods but never learns to read or function within the human world is certainly not a fully developed stage 2 child. And in our current education system, there is an enormous imbalance, because what's happened in our culture, our current culture, is that we've taken the cultural learning side of the equation and we've inflated it to the point that it has almost completely devoured the other half, which is the enchantment with and exploration of the natural world. I mean, we teach kids to read, which is wonderful, but we don't give them long, open afternoons to wander through the woods and discover what generally fascinates them and what they want to read about. We teach them math, which is essential, but we do it for 7 hours a day in a room with fluorescent lights while their body is aching to be outside, moving, climbing, touching, alive. We teach them history, very important, but we don't give them consistent, unstructured time in the natural world where they could develop the felt relationship with the earth that would make that history resonate in their bones rather than just sit in their heads as abstract facts for a test. And perhaps most critically, the way schooling is currently structured, the rigid schooling with the bells and the constant evaluation and the standardized metrics, is that it inadvertently communicates something to the child that is deeply damaging to the explorer spirit. It communicates that your curiosity is less important than our agenda. That what you find fascinating is irrelevant unless it happens to align with today's lesson plan. And over time, drip by drip, year by year, the child gets the message that they learn to suppress their own organic curiosity in favor of externally imposed goals. They learn that exploration is something that happens after the real work is done, if there's time left over, which there usually isn't. And the wonder doesn't just die in one dramatic moment. It just quietly fades like a fire that nobody tends. And by the time the child is 11 or 12, heading into adolescence, that wild explorer who wants to touch everything and taste everything and know everything, that explorer has often been domesticated into a student. Someone who performs learning rather than truly living it. Someone who memorizes facts for a test so that they can get a good grade, but then forgets 80% of it the moment the test is over. Such is the way of learning for the vast majority of our schooling system. And then, of course, there's also the screen issue, which I think is a huge, massive disruptor of stage 2 development in our current time, because whatever time the current system does leave unstructured, the evening, the weekends, the summers, more and more and more of that time is being consumed by screens, because the screens offer artificial stimulation in the exact place where the child needs enchantment with nature, or more cultural learning, but like in a more open and unstructured way. And those are fundamentally different things. Stimulation is engineered from the outside to capture your attention through rapid novelty, dopamine loops, bright colors, and endless scrolling. It fills you temporarily, but also kind of leaves you depleted. But enchantment arises from within. When a living being encounters the depth and mystery of the living world, which doesn't deplete you, it nourishes you. It grows your capacity for wonder rather than eroding it. And when a child spends 5, 6, 7 hours a day in artificial stimulation, almost no time in genuine unstructured encounter with the natural world, what you get is a child who is simultaneously overstimulated and profoundly under-enchanted, and that is an absolutely devastating combination to carry into adolescence. It's also at this stage, the ages between 4 and the onset of physical puberty, that a significant portion of our trauma and our emotional wounding takes place. And I want to sit with this for a moment because it's really significant. I mean, think about what's happening developmentally. The child now has an ego. They have a sense of I. They have an autobiographical memory that is recording everything, but that ego is still brand new. It's fledgling, it's fragile, it's wide open. The child at this stage is absorbing everything about how the world works, about who they are, about what's acceptable and what is not, about whether they're loved and whether they're safe, and they're doing so without the cognitive sophistication to question any of it. Whatever messages they receive at this stage, they don't really evaluate them, they swallow them whole. And so this is the stage where so many of the deepest imprints get laid down. This is where the child learns, my curiosity is welcome here, or stop asking so many questions. This is where they learn, your way of exploring the world is beautiful, or sit down, be quiet, and pay attention to what matters. This is where they learn, your body is intelligent and trustworthy, or your body is something to be controlled and managed. Every interaction with a parent, a teacher, a peer, a bully, a coach, it's all going directly into the foundation of this still forming ego. And because the child's center of gravity is sociocentric, because belonging is everything to them at this stage, it's literally their survival, they will adjust themselves in any way they need to in order to fit in. They will dim their curiosity if curiosity is not valued. They will disconnect from their body if the body is not welcome. They will stop exploring if exploring gets them into trouble or earns them disapproval. They will trade their wonder for approval because at this age, approval is survival in the particular wound that belongs to stage 2, the wound that is really specific to the explorer, is the crushing of the child's natural enchantment with the world and their trust in their own senses and their own body as instruments of knowing, their wonder. And when a child is told again and again, implicitly and explicitly, that the way they naturally want to engage with the world is wrong, too messy, too loud, too physical, too slow, too weird, too unproductive, something very, very specific breaks. And it's not just the child's relationship with their own wonder, but it's really the child's relationship with their own natural aliveness. They stop trusting the signals that their body and their senses are sending them. They stop following the thread of fascination. They learn to override the felt sense of, I want to go there, I want to know that, in favor of, what am I supposed to be doing right now? What can I do so that I won't be punished or so that I won't be shunned? And that shift from inner directed exploration to being solely focused on outer directed compliance, not that some of that isn't necessary, it certainly is, but that overall orientation of being solely focused on outer directed compliance is one of the most consequential things that can happen to a developing human being, because it severs the child from the very instrument through which they would eventually, later on in their life, find their way to soul, which is going to be no way other than their own wonder, curiosity, and fascination. So if you resonate with any of this, with the sense that your own wonder, fascination, and natural aliveness has been dimmed, you may have some tasks to go back to complete from this stage. And I think we can all relate to this to a degree. The world kind of dims us, the world as it is in this egocentric society, it certainly dims us to a degree. But there's several things that you can do in order to go back and gain back this capacity. But before you try to go back and complete these unfinished developmental tasks, specifically from this stage, you should identify whether your wound or your incomplete task of this stage has to do with nature or it has to do with culture. If you have an incomplete developmental task regarding your oneness and enchantment with nature, then you probably feel at home within the social world, within culture, but you might feel very scared of nature. You feel scared to wander into nature, and you feel scared of bugs and flies, and you might become extremely preoccupied with irrational worries that some creature might jump out at you and eat you or something like that, to the point that you can't even go into the natural world by yourself. And if that is the case, then your task is to get the fuck outside gradually and become totally absorbed in nature, to let your senses, your natural wonder and aliveness completely guide you, to let yourself be completely moved by it. Go to a natural space with no destination and just let your natural intuition and aliveness guide you. Let yourself wander, hug a tree, talk to a tree, sit by a river, talk to the river, take all of your clothes off and swim in the river, walk barefoot on the grass. Allow yourself to be completely immersed by all of your senses in these nature experiences. Let the beauty of the natural world penetrate you and move you. If you don't feel safe out in nature, it may be beneficial to learn basic wilderness and survival skills. There's classes you can take. I promise you they are very important, and you will love learning these things, and you'll be very glad that you learned them. And of course, you might also want to learn how to carry and use a weapon. That's definitely something that would be valuable, and I'd even say necessary if you're going to do like deep nature immersions on your own. You can also explore nature with a trusted friend, that you feel safe with, and who also will allow you the space to move freely and unobstructedly within nature, because I can't emphasize enough how important this is, because without a healthy, enchanting connection with nature, we will never be able to grow down and fully live from our soul, which is our own deepest, truest, wildest nature expressed. Soul is the conversation that we have with the world, with wild nature. And without the ability to even be in nature and connect with nature deeply, our soul will probably be underground pretty much forever. But there's also another side of the coin with the trauma and the wounding that can happen at this stage, where one may feel that they have this connection with nature, but also they might feel disconnected or feel like they don't fit in within the culture, within the social world. And if this is you, where you feel like a misfit or like you don't belong, then you will have to do something a little bit different in order to complete the unfinished developmental task from this stage. And so if this is you, your work is essentially the opposite of the first wound. Your work is to gradually, gently re-enter the human garden, the human social space. And that starts with something really simple, but also potentially vulnerable. It's going to activate your parts that want to avoid connection. And it starts just with showing up. Maybe it's joining a community, taking a class, not an online class, but an in-person class where you actually feel the bodies of other people. And, take a class in something that genuinely interests you, of course. Maybe volunteer somewhere, get involved in a local project, just being with people and learning the skills it takes to be among people, how to hold a small talk conversation. I know we all hate small talk, but it can still be valuable to learn that skill just to feel like you fit in within society and that you are among other humans. Skills like how to set boundaries, how to ask for what you need, how to be seen without armoring up, because these are all skills that is needed in order to create and live within a culturally viable ego that we feel safe in. That's going to carry us throughout the rest of the developmental stages throughout our life. And also know that there is no shame at all in needing to go back and complete some of the tasks from these stages, because we have no control over our upbringing. We are completely at the will of the circumstances of this incarnation. We didn't choose our woundings and we didn't choose our traumas. All that we can do is just show up the best that we can, tending to what we need to tend to. And to be honest, I completely relate to the wound of feeling at home in nature, but not so much in culture. It's been an edge for me to just show up in the human world, doing normal human things and being among just people, and not retreating into my solitude, into my inner world of ideas and thoughts, which I love going into nature to engage with that. So know that we're all kind of dealing with unfinished developmental tasks. It's not really completely our fault. Our world kind of traumatizes us and wounds us. And we kind of have to go back and reconnect with nature, reconnect with ourselves in order to continue the proper unfoldment of development so that we can become the person that we are meant to be in this lifetime. Okay, so to summarize stage 2, which this explanation is getting pretty long here, so I won't go too much longer. Stage 2 is the explorer in the garden, and the task is twofold. Discover the enchantments of the natural world and learn cultural ways. The gift that this stage offers to the community is wonder. The wound that our culture most commonly inflicts at this stage is the crushing of the child's natural aliveness and curiosity through overstructuring, screen culture, and an educational system that, while it has genuine value and contains many good-hearted people, has become catastrophically imbalanced towards cognitive development at the expense of sensory, bodily, relational, and ecological development. And if you have incomplete tasks here, your work is to identify which side of the equation, nature or culture or both, needs tending, and to move towards it with courage and patience and self-compassion. The child leaves the stage as their center of gravity when they hit puberty, which is an absolutely seismic shift in their way of being, where they enter into the stage of early adolescence, stage 3, the Thespian, at the Oasis. And the definition of Thespian, by the way, because I had no idea what the word meant when I first read the book, is a formal or theatrical term for an actor or actress. And so the stage name is essentially the actor at the Oasis, because Plotkin lists the primary task at this stage is to fashion a social presence that is both authentic, the nature task, and also socially acceptable, which is the culture task. And the key word here is fashion, because there's already this pre-existing society and culture that exists, that you were born into and raised within. It's like your oasis. It's your source of nourishment. It's your home. It's your place of belonging. And in order to belong at the oasis so that you are not outcasted, the task here in early adolescence is to fashion an identity that can fit in and positively contribute to the oasis, to the culture. The task here is essentially to deepen your ego development to the point that you have a secure and authentic self that is fully embedded within and rooted within the culture. And on the model of development, as you can see here on the screen, puberty, which is the transition from stage 2 to stage 3, happens at the southernmost point in terms of cardinal direction on the wheel. And this is associated with the time that the sun is at its peak in the sky. And it's also associated with the season of summer, the time of peak light, of the most intense energy, because this is exactly what adolescence and puberty feels like. The body is changing, emotions are amplified, there's so much energy running through the person's system. The body is on fire with new desires, new sensations, new ways of being. And the gift of this stage to the community, according to Plotkin, is precisely that. It's fire. It's the raw, passionate, creative, sometimes chaotic yet profoundly beautiful energy that adolescents bring to the world. I remember when I was, I think, in 6th grade, so we're talking like 12 years old here, and after school we would go to the YMCA with my friends, and we would just cause absolute mayhem within the entire building. We would be running around, screaming, cursing, because we started to curse. We began to make sexual jokes, always doing mischievous things and testing every boundary that we could find, pushing every limit just to see what would happen. And at the time, the adults around us thought we were completely out of control. They would yell at us sometimes. We were threatened to be kicked out of the place multiple times. But looking back through the lens of this model, I can see so clearly that that was just fire. That was the South energy coming fully online. That was just a group of young boys who had just hit puberty and were burning with life force that they had absolutely no idea what to do with. And that energy was not a problem to be solved. It was a developmental force that needed to be met and channeled and honored. And Plotkin has a beautiful quote to describe the oncoming of this stage. He writes, "The world fairly explodes for us with all this running about and erotic heat. The root impulse of sex is creative action, not merely procreation, but also the engendering impetus of life itself and of the very universe. As indigenous inhabitants of the cosmos, we're driven to merge with others and create never-before-seen wonders. In early adolescence, our strongest urge is not simply for sexual intimacy, but also for the imaginative forging of innovative social forms. While culture was a given in childhood, now it becomes a fabric for us to refashion." He goes on, Here, there's an urgency to make something of oneself, to plunge into the social world, to fire up new varieties of relationships, to leap into love and heroic adventures, to take on risky and unfamiliar responsibilities, to choose a direction in life, to seek a mate or lover, to develop a style, a flair, a name, a gig, a special talent, a distinctive personality. End quote. And I think we can all relate to when we first entered this stage, because it was at this time that suddenly social dynamics seemed to matter a lot more. Because when we were in stage 2, the explorer in the garden, there was still a strong flare of innocence. The stage was mostly just children playing and exploring with each other without a deep self-awareness, without being very aware of how others were perceiving them, without knowledge of a social hierarchy. But now in stage 3, suddenly your perception in the eyes of others, your place within the social hierarchy, matters immensely, and you feel this viscerally as you walk through your day-to-day life in this stage. To paint the picture, when you enter stage 3, suddenly there are cool kids and uncool kids. Suddenly what you wear matters, what music you listen to matters, how you talk matters, who you sit with at lunch is literally a political decision. You become excruciatingly aware of your body, how it looks, how it's developing or not developing compared to everybody else. You become aware of sexual attraction for the first time, not just as a vague feeling, but as this overwhelming force that reorganizes your entire inner world. And you become aware, perhaps for the first time in your life, that other people are watching you, they're evaluating you, they're ranking you, and that awareness changes everything. And I remember this so vividly throughout middle school when it first began, in high school when it deepened. I wanted so badly to have the coolest Nike shoes, wearing these colorful and supposedly cool Nike Elite socks that all the cool kids wore. I wanted to perform the best in sports and in the weekly mile run we had to do in PE class. And when I began to be attracted to girls and them to me, I was hyper aware of all the dynamics and all the social dynamics and like what my friends would think of me. Like, oh, dating this girl looks so cool in the eyes of my friends, or oh, dating this girl would cause them to make fun of me. And like, you're kind of like always making that evaluation of what I say or what I do is going to be liked and accepted by the larger group, or will it not, and will I be outcasted? And you also like cycle through all of these different identities as well. I mean, I remember I went through a phase of wearing mostly basketball clothes and then dressing more like a cross-country runner. And other times I leaned more into the intellectual persona. I began listening to rap music because that's what everyone else was listening to. But then at some point I discovered house music, like way before everyone else discovered house music, and no one else around me liked that music. So I kept it to myself mostly. I didn't really like to share my enthusiasm for that genre for a while until other people started liking it. I was way much earlier to the scene than everybody else. But I remember this is also the time when others in my school began experimenting with identities that were not seen in the earlier stages of development. Alt, goth, emo, punk, skater, preppy, jock, nerd. And you could literally watch people trying these identities on like outfits. I mean, someone would show up on Monday completely transformed from who they were on Friday. New clothes, new music, new vocabulary, a new attitude, a new way of walking. And some people would commit to a look for years because it was very authentic, and others would cycle through 3 or 4 in an entire semester. And at the time, we would judge each other for this. Oh my gosh, they're being so fake. Oh, they're just trying to be something that they're not. But what was actually happening through the lens of Plotkin's model was exactly what was supposed to be happening. Every single one of those kids was doing the work of the Thespian. They were on the stage of the social world, trying on costumes, experimenting with roles, testing different versions of themselves against the reaction of their peers to figure out, who even am I in this world? That's the task. That's the developmental imperative of this stage. The Thespian must perform first in order to discover. And what's really interesting is that this is also the stage where cliques become very rigid. And of course, like we said, social hierarchies come online. And in stage 2, the social world was relatively fluid. You could play with mostly whoever. Like everything kind of goes in stage 2 when you're a child, the explorer in the garden. But in stage 3, the social world becomes stratified. There are tiers, there are groups, there are people who are in and people who are out, and the adolescent becomes intensely, obsessively attuned to where they sit within this hierarchy, because remember, the center of gravity in stage 3 is still group-centric, it's sociocentric, whether that be someone's peer group, their ethnic group, religious group, even their nation. And this is where most of the pain of this stage really lives, because the social arena of early adolescence is actually pretty brutal. I'm sure you can remember how brutal it is. The in-group and out-group dynamics are vicious. The feedback is instant and merciless. If your performance doesn't land, you know immediately through a look somebody gives you, through a laugh, a whisper, a sudden silence. And for the adolescent who is struggling to find their footing, who hasn't yet figured out a social persona that works, who maybe has qualities that don't fit in neatly with any of the available categories or any of the available groups, the stage can be so genuinely agonizing. The bullying, the exclusion, the quiet cruelty of being unseen and unvalued and unaccepted in a world where being seen and valued and accepted is everything. And I'm sure you can relate to it. But of course, as the Thespian is trying on various costumes and ways of being and going in the world, ideally they are sharpening their awareness of who they are in relation to others, what clothes feel authentic and what doesn't, what types of people they like hanging around, what hobbies they enjoy, what their values are, what their political beliefs are, what kind of music generally moves them versus what they just listen to because everyone else does, what kind of humor is actually theirs versus what they perform in order to fit in. And so this process of differentiation, of sorting through all the available options and beginning to feel out, this is me and this is not me, is genuinely valuable and a developmental imperative at this stage. It's the ego learning to author itself. And when this process is supported, when the adolescent has enough safety and enough honest mirroring for people who actually care about them and also are similar to them, what emerges is a social self that is both functional and real, a self that can navigate the social world without losing its center. That's the healthy outcome of stage 3. But I'm sure that you can feel this tension, even to this day, the tension between being authentic, being real, and being socially accepted, because inevitably what happens during this process, inevitably, is that parts of us that we learned were not acceptable go into the dark. They get put into a dark corner of the psyche, the shadow, and so we lose parts of ourselves in the social individuation process. And it's not just in the stage 3 early adolescent stage that parts of us go into the shadow. It happens in earlier stages too, where we develop a complex array of survival strategies in order to get our needs met. And these strategies exist in the forms of what we could call sub-personalities, or what internal family systems calls parts. Because what happens throughout our development, but especially intensifying in early adolescence, is that certain parts of us take on protective roles. There are parts that learn to manage our social presentation, making sure that we say the right thing, wear the right thing, don't reveal too much, anything that could potentially get us hurt or get us outcasted. There are parts called firefighters that leap quickly into action when a threat gets past the manager's defenses, which flood us with anger or humor or social withdrawal, or even with various other more extreme coping mechanisms such as drugs and alcohol, in order to keep the pain at bay. And then there are other parts of us that get exiled, and this is often what we mean by shadow, the parts of us that are wounded, perhaps too sensitive, perhaps too strange and too intense, but ultimately something that we deemed not safe to have and express in our experience. And those exiled parts, they don't just disappear completely. They go underground, they get locked in the basement of the psyche, and they still carry the original wound, still frozen at the age that they were rejected and outcasted into the shadow. And these parts of us can flood us with extreme emotions whenever their pain becomes activated. And so, with the larger network that is our ego dividing into various sub-personalities in order to survive physically and socially, what's often at the center of this system is what Bill Plotkin calls the loyal soldier. And the loyal soldier is essentially the manager-in-chief of this whole operation that is the ego. It's the dominant survival identity, the overarching strategy that the ego settles on as its primary way of navigating the world. And it could take on so many different forms. For one person, the loyal soldier is the achiever, the one whose parents instilled the values of performance, excellence, and achievement into them, and punish them if they did not perform to their standards. For another person, it might be the people pleaser, the one who had learned that safety lives in making everyone else comfortable and never causing friction and being so agreeable and so accommodating that no one would ever have a reason to cast you out. For another, it's the tough one, the one who learned that vulnerability is weakness and that the way to survive is to need nobody. For another, it's being the class clown, the rebellious one, the good girl, the invisible one, the intellectual, the caretaker. Whatever worked ultimately is what this loyal soldier will continue doing and perpetrating throughout your life unless you have the awareness to stop it and choose a new pattern. And so what needs to happen in order to healthily move through this stage is that, to a degree, the loyal soldier needs to be worked with so that its grip on the psyche loosens, so that the individual can fashion a social identity that is truly authentic, truly their own, so that they feel like their life is something that is truly self-authored, something that is aligned with their values and who they really are. And Bill Plotkin compares the loyal soldier's subpersonality in a similar way to how Japanese soldiers in World War II, who had been living for several years on a deserted island, despite the war having been over for well over a decade, they were still fully devoted to trying to win the war upon being rescued from the island. And this devotion that your ego has towards keeping you safe is something to honor and revere, because the loyal soldier subpersonality is not a pathology. It's actually an intelligent response to the living conditions that you grew up in. So it's not something to be denied or to shun. It's actually something to love. And through that loving appreciation, the loyal soldier can loosen its grip, allowing other parts of oneself that are essential for the individual's authenticity and wholeness to come forth in service of the fashioning of an authentic social identity. But before working with your loyal soldier subpersonality, you must first determine if the war that it's fighting is really over, because remember, your loyal soldier was fighting a fucking war in order to keep you safe, and it developed all sorts of strategies and coping mechanisms in order to do this. So you must first assess if it's actually safe in order for those strategies to loosen their grip and step aside, because a lot of the time it's actually not safe for the loyal soldier to loosen its grip. If you're still in the abusive household, still in the toxic friendship group or relationship, still in a situation where your basic needs are not being met, or maybe you're a queer person in a deeply homophobic household, or even worse, in a country that actively persecutes queers, then telling your loyal soldier to stand down is actually very dangerous. It'd be like telling a soldier to put down their weapon while they're still actively being shot at. The loyal soldier would rightly refuse, and it should refuse, because the loyal soldier is not stupid. It's reading the environment, and if the environment is still hostile, the strategies need to stay online. However, I'm willing to guess that for the majority of you watching this, you probably are in a relatively safe environment where at least some of the loyal soldier strategies, probably most of the loyal soldier strategies, can begin to loosen their grip. And of course, guys, like ideally we would live in the soul-centric society, the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, where everyone accepts each other, and we wouldn't need these loyal soldier strategies so badly. But of course we don't live in that world. We live in a mostly ego-centric world, and it's in this world that all of us are going to inevitably develop some loyal soldier strategies. And so if this is you, what you can do to begin working with your loyal soldiers to loosen its grip so that more of the whole of who you are can come through, is that first you simply need to see the loyal soldier in its fullness. You just first need to become aware of it, because awareness of a pattern is the first step towards changing it. So you can first start by noticing certain things happening in your experience, but also by asking yourself some very honest questions. You can notice when you feel yourself shifting in social situations, when you feel yourself putting on a certain face, adjusting your tone, choosing words that aren't quite yours. Notice the moments when you feel a gap between what you're presenting and what you're actually feeling. Notice when you laugh at something that isn't funny to you. Notice when you agree with something you don't actually agree with. Notice when you swallow something that you wanted to say. Those micro moments of self-abandonment, those are precisely the loyal soldier at work. And you've been doing them so automatically for so long that they've become invisible. So just seeing them is a radical act. And really, in my experience, what I've noticed underpinning all of the loyal soldier strategies is this mentality and overall energetic orientation of pushing and striving, where consciousness narrows and you develop this tunnel vision, striving to get to the golden nugget at the end of the tunnel, whether that be more money, more status, more social approval, belonging, sex, whatever it is. And this is at odds with the more relaxed, being and allowing orientation that genuine authenticity arises out of, where you simply are just allowing what wants to express and what wants to emerge through you to emerge. So notice whenever that is happening in your experience to illuminate some of the loyal soldier strategies, but also go a bit deeper. When you notice these patterns, actually choose a different, more conscious avenue. You can also go deeper by asking yourself some honest questions. When do I notice myself closing down a true desire or feeling? Why do I do this? What feelings, emotions, and desires do I close down most often in social situations? You can also ask, what is the version of me that I present to the world most consistently? And to what degree is this version of me who I really am? And this is the key question. Ask yourself, what am I afraid would happen if I stopped presenting this version and began to express all of what I really feel and am? What am I afraid people would see if I dropped the persona? Because the answer to that question will tell you everything. If you're the achiever, you might discover that underneath the performance is a terror of being seen as ordinary, as worthless, as not enough without the gold stars of achievement. If you're the people pleaser, you might find that underneath is a deep belief that your authentic needs and desires are burdensome, that the real you is too much or too needy to be loved. If you're the tough macho one, you might find underneath a tremendous well of grief and tenderness that was never able to express because it wasn't safe to express. Whatever it is, the thing you're hiding by performing tells you the shape of your loyal soldier. And as you're going about this loyal soldier work, what's essential is to approach this part of you with love, openness, gratitude, and appreciation. Be very aware of any other parts of you that approach the loyal soldier and its strategies with hostility, perhaps through forms of bashing, shaming, inner criticizing, because all that does is fuel the war inside of you even more. It creates more internal friction, and it's precisely that friction and resistance the loyal soldier senses that is the reason it is fighting in the first place. So approach it with gratitude, because this is a part of you that has been working tirelessly for years, sometimes for decades, in order to keep you safe. And the way that you get a loyal soldier to stand down is by first honoring its service. You might actually say to it, and I know this might sound a bit weird, but it's incredibly powerful to do this. You can either say out loud to yourself, like actually in your heart, like not just saying it just to say it, but saying it like you mean it. You can say it either out loud or internally. You can say something like, I see you. I see what you've been doing for me. I see how hard you've been working, and I want you to know the war is over. You kept me alive. You got me through, and I don't need you to fight so hard anymore. You can rest. And as you're doing this, you can literally name out all of the loyal soldier strategies that it employed to keep you safe, and just let it know that you're safe now and you don't have to do this anymore. And what I find is that if you do this sincerely, and you're probably gonna have to do it over and over and over again, something in your system will shift. Not all at once, but it will happen slowly. Something within you will slowly, gradually soften. And the more you catch your loyal soldier firing in the moment, and you have the awareness to catch it and the skill to attune to yourself, to relax your nervous system and tell the loyal soldier it doesn't have to fight anymore, because you're genuinely in an environment and place in your life where you don't have to fight that war anymore, that war of physical and social survival, slowly but surely, your entire system will relax, and more of the whole of who you are will come through. But it's not just awareness, of course. It's not just like relaxing the soldier that will ultimately loosen its grip. I mean, sometimes you actually have to walk into the very fire of the very thing the loyal soldier feared the most, maybe going to that attractive, but maybe a little bit risky social gathering where you may wind up looking like an absolute fool, where your loyal soldier is worried that you'll look like a fool, or speaking up in a meeting where every cell in your body, the loyal soldier is screaming to stay quiet, or telling someone how you actually feel about them when the loyal soldier is begging you to keep it safe and surface level, or wearing the thing that you love even though you know that people might look at you a little bit weird, because the reality is that the loyal soldier's grip does not loosen through understanding it alone, or even just relaxing and attuning to it alone. It loosens through experience. It loosens when you actually do the thing that it told you would destroy you, that it thought would be its worst nightmare. And when you discover that you survive that, and not just that you survive that you actually thrive in the midst of going into the fire of what the loyal soldier fears, and that you actually realize that you thrive and you grow immensely psychologically, and you experience the beauty that it is to live a truly authentic life. That's when the loyal soldier will actually stand down for good, when it actually is realizing you are living and experiencing a life where it doesn't need it anymore. And what's actually really important too, and this is probably super, super crucial to getting the loyal soldier to stand down, is to find at least one person, ideally many more, who can hold your authenticity. At least one friend, one social group, a mentor, a therapist, or a coach whom you can practice being real with without any performance whatsoever. Because again, remember, the loyal soldier was born in relationship. It was built in response to relational experiences of rejection, judgment, and conditional acceptance. And it can only truly soften in relationship too, in a field of unconditional acceptance. You need the corrective experience of being fully seen and not rejected, showing someone the thing you've been hiding and having them say, hey, I see that, and I'm still here, and I still love you. That single experience can do more to loosen the loyal soldier's grip than years of trying to think your way free on your own. And a final thing that I find to be crucial in working with these protective subpersonalities is to develop a very regular reflective practice. Start a document in Google Docs or in your journal, which can be a stream of consciousness practice where you, with absolutely no filter, write down all of your thoughts, feelings, emotions, whatever is on your mind and heart. Just let it all dump, let it all come out. This is like authenticity practicing, feeling, and actually expressing everything that you're feeling. You can even do like a little voice record where you just let it out in a stream of conscious format by yourself. You don't have to like write it, but you can also speak it. That might actually be more powerful, more of a somatic release. Stream of consciousness, super powerful for this. You can also meditate regularly, just like witnessing your experience. Not like attaching so much, but also holding your experience close. And also taking long walks alone in nature. I mean, for me, nature was the place that held me when I felt like no one could hold me and see all of me, where I felt like I had to constantly put on a persona to fit in. Nature was the one place where I could be myself, because it's in nature that the noise subsides, the worries and people and social dynamics and of culture, it just all kind of quiets. And when you sit quietly with yourself, with no one to perform for, no audience to manage, no role to play, you start to hear the voice underneath the loyal soldier, the quieter voice, the one that says, hey, actually, this is what I really feel. This is what I really want. This is who I really am. And that voice, if you learn to listen to it and trust it, is the thread that will eventually lead you beyond stage 3 altogether. And this is actually a pretty significant bulk of what I do in my coaching practice, helping people loosen the grip of the protective subpersonalities that are closing down their true self so that they can live a life more aligned with who they truly are. I've worked with chronic people pleasers. I've worked with high-performing achievers whose loyal soldiers are just absolutely burning them out. Clients who literally freeze whenever a piece of their authenticity tries to come forth. And what I've seen time and time again, both in my own life and the lives of those that I work with, is that there's this long lost generative aliveness that comes online when parts of you that were in the dark make their way back into the light of conscious awareness. You just feel fucking alive. You feel free. Life beams with hope and possibility again. Your relationships become deeper and truer. Your laughter comes from a place deep inside you, and it's so nourishing. And you realize, holy fucking shit, this is what it's actually like to be myself, and I love myself. I love having all parts of myself as I'm going through the world. This is great. I can be myself. And having access to this more full authenticity is what allows one to complete the task of this stage of fashioning an authentic social identity and move into the next stage, stage 4, late adolescence, which I'll talk about here in a minute because I want to talk about culture and society a bit before I move into that next stage. And so what I just described there with being authentic and feeling comfortable and safe and stable in your social identity is actually something that is an extremely rare achievement in our current society. In the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, we would live and grow up within a cultural field of love that nourishes us, that supports us, that accepts our authenticity, with true adults and true elders that can see us fully, with the knowledge and faculties to aid us in our development through stage 3 and beyond. And ideally, in that more beautiful world, we would complete stage 3 by age 16 or so, maybe 18 at the latest. But you see, we currently live within a mostly ego-centric culture. The societal script that we grew up with is get good grades so you can get accepted to a good university so that you can have a nice, respectable, well-paying job that allows you for the experience and the comforts and luxuries of life, a nice car, a nice house, a beautiful romantic partner, the most innovative technology, and work that job for 40 or so years, and then at age 65, retire and then do what you actually want to do for the rest of your life. It's precisely the life of comfort within the acceptable social identity that is indicative of stage 3. And notice how that's not the heart-opened, world-centric, soul-embodied, visionary steward and caretaker of life devoted to bringing forth love, beauty, goodness, and truth into the world that is indicative of the later stages of true adult development. And I was even being generous with that explanation of the current societal script because our current society is actually even more pathological than that script. That script that I said is more like a healthy adolescent script. But our current society is actually operating under a very deeply pathological script. And to illuminate what I mean by this, Bill Plotkin describes the archetype of someone deemed successful in our society as the societal entrepreneur, someone focused on social advancement. The societal entrepreneur is looking for opportunities to make things happen, progress, arrangements that'll be interesting, profitable, and a contribution to society, or at least ones that will allow him to get by socially and financially. He or she wants to create a notable place for himself on the socioeconomic map, a way to compete in a healthy way, a way to obtain attention, admiration, sexual partners, or at the very least, a decent place in the world. He's looking for the authentic combination that attracts his fair share of social, sexual, or economic fulfillment. End quote. And do you see and do you notice how this is the current societal script? This is the model of success in our current world. Do you see that? And even if people don't embody this themselves, they look up to and worship people that do embody precisely this. Celebrities, the Kardashians, actresses in premiere films, sports stars, music stars, all those who are living the good life in society's eyes, those who make lots of money, have high status, can have any romantic or sexual partners that they want, who can fly first class to a tropical island whenever they want. That is the societal script. And do you see how fucking harmful that is for like everyone to be fully invested in that script? I'm not saying that that script is inherently bad. What I'm saying and what we're articulating is that that script is a stage of development, and that's not a bad thing in and of itself. But when you have an entire society that is fully invested in living that life and looks up to and worships people who are living the embodiment of that life, that's a huge problem, because in that we're only focusing on ourselves. Only ourselves, or just our small little social group. The vast majority of people in the world They just want to reap the benefits of socioeconomic success in their short times here on this planet. It's all while the planet is dying, all while we are in ecological catastrophe with humans causing a 6th mass extinction here on Earth. And this societal structure where getting to the top of the capitalist hierarchy is the goal, is what we're ingrained to try to do in our lives, is contributing to massive, massive, massive wealth inequality, leaving billions impoverished and leaving billions living paycheck to paycheck. Elon Musk, the pinnacle embodiment of the societal entrepreneur, just became the world's first trillionaire, hoarding literally over a fucking $1 trillion, all while billions of people are impoverished. Billions are living paycheck to paycheck just to get by. We don't even have universal health care here in America. The dude could end world hunger with that money if he wanted to. If I had that money, I'd probably invest it in some like massive, massive, massive worldwide human development project and start like a new civilization. And the literal president of America, the most powerful nation in the world, Donald Trump, is also a pinnacle embodiment of this. He only cares about himself for the most part, his material gain, his status, his maintaining of himself at the top of the social hierarchy. Nothing else at all matters to him. And so this is why the premise of Bill Plotkin's Nature and the Human Soul is that we currently live in a pathologically adolescent society. It's not that adolescence itself is bad, it's a necessary stage of development, but as a whole, the human species has become halted at stage 3, early adolescence, to the point that long after the fire of physical adolescence wears off, people at 40, 50, 60, 70, 80 years old never stop playing the game of trying to fashion and live within the best, highest status, most comfortable socioeconomic identity and circumstances possible. And this is precisely the reason that our world is in grave danger. The climate crisis, wealth inequality, mass poverty, war, slavery, genocide are not causes of the meta crisis that we find ourselves in as a species, but rather they are symptoms that manifest out of the root cause, which is a profound and pervasive failure of human development worldwide. And this reframe is everything. This is what makes Plotkin's work so good. He's not saying the meta crisis is a political problem that needs a political solution. He's not saying it's a technological problem that needs a technological solution. He's not even saying it's an economic problem that needs an economic solution, although different tech in different economic circumstances could help. What he's really saying is that it's a developmental problem. It's a human maturational problem. He's saying that the reason our world is dying is because the species running it never grew up. And until we address that, nothing else we do will be sufficient. And this problem runs so deeply and so pervasively, infiltrating virtually every major institution on the planet. It's in the education system, in the university system, where all university is really trying to get you to do is to get you to fit in and become a functioning member of the pre-existing adolescent world, which is really to just be another cog in the machine, another hamster on the wheel. Not that you cannot learn some genuine, valuable stuff there. You certainly can. But for the most part, if you want to become the most that you can become in this lifetime, you cannot rely on the university system alone to take you there. It's also infiltrated the field of psychotherapy, where much of psychotherapy is to simply help people adjust and cope within the psychopathologies that they inevitably inherit from this deeply, deeply, deeply pathological world. And it's not that that type of therapy can't be valuable. It certainly can be and help to a degree. But also what I find in my experience and the experience of clients that I've worked with and just through reading hundreds of books of psychological theory, what I find is that true psychological wholeness and well-being comes from living in alignment with your life's purpose, your soul's purpose, which naturally positively contributes to the world, which fulfills your evolutionary task as a human being. And to do this in today's society, of course, is difficult because you have to go against the grain. You have to go against others' expectations because those expectations that were implanted into you are the expectations of how to be a psychological adolescent. And you actually have to experience great suffering and great grief in order to leave the cultural pacer of stage 3 behind and choose your soul. And most forms of psychotherapy would never do this. They would just help you develop more effective coping skills so that you can adjust better to the pre-existing society, which is a pathological one, which again, learning those coping skills can be very great and very beneficial. Having someone to talk to about all of that can be very great and very beneficial. But to be honest, the reason why after undergrad, I graduated with a degree in psychology, the reason that I didn't choose the long and enduring 6 to 7 year route of becoming a licensed therapist is because I sensed this, because I had already gone through the despair of an existential crisis and actually saw the profound value of experiencing it and all of the suffering that went along with it. And this might be a radical take, but I 100% stand by this take I'm about to say here, is that the reason so many people in the world are having existential crises right now, which is also the reason that depression is at all-time highs, where people feel lost, where people feel that life is meaningless, where they feel this deep, hollow ache inside of them that no amount of success or comfort or distraction can fill, is not because something is wrong with them. It's because something is actually deeply, deeply right with them. It's because their soul is calling. Their soul is banging on the door of the ego's fortress saying, hey, there is more. There is so much more to life and you are not living it, and I will keep nudging you until you turn towards me. And our culture looks at that person, the person in existential crisis, the person whose carefully constructed life feels like it's falling apart, the person who can't get out of bed because nothing feels meaningful anymore. And culture tells them, you're depressed. Here's medication. Let's get you back to functioning. Or if it's psychotherapy, here's a coping strategy. Here's a skill for you to cope with the awful world we live in and the awful way of life it perpetrates. Let's get you back to normal. And normal means back to stage 3. And I'm not saying all forms of psychotherapy are like this. Many are not. But I did some looking into the field and I was kind of like, nah, bro, this isn't for me. But I still wanted to do similar work. I wanted to help people and work with people one-to-one. So I got life coaching training and consider myself something like a soul guide now. And as a soul guide, if a client comes to me experiencing something like an existential crisis, what I see my job as doing is to actually nudge them deeper into that crisis, into the very heart of their suffering. And of course, only if the loyal soldier war is truly over and not too quickly to the point that the client doesn't have the conscious coping skills to deal with the inevitable destabilization of the ego that takes place as the leadership of your inner kingdom is shifting from being ego-led to being soul-led. But that's a different approach than most forms of therapy, to drive you into the very heart of your suffering rather than just learning to cope better with the pre-existing life conditions and ego structure. And so such is the state of our world. We live in a pathologically adolescent stage 3 world. That's the reason that we are in grave danger as a species. And I could go on and on and on about this for hours, but I think you get the idea now. And what is needed for an individual who is butting up against the limitations of stage 3, who feels fairly comfortable and secure in their authentic stage 3 identity, and is now feeling a call to something more, something deeper, something truer, something that might not be able to be named or pinned down with words, but you feel it. It's a calling that emerges from your depths, that this is not all there is to life, that there's more to life, that the life of material comfort and socioeconomic success is not all there is. And by following this calling, you undergo the passage of what Bill Plotkin calls confirmation, which marks the completion of the early adolescent personality, which renders one ripe for the journey to soul and to who they truly are, to their place of ultimate belonging in the world. And as this occurs, as you can see here on the screen, the individual moves into stage 4, the wanderer in the cocoon. And it is here in stage 4 that is associated most strongly with the west cardinal direction, because it is in the west that the sun sets, ushering in the night, the period of darkness. And it is in the night, by exploring the dark, mysterious caverns of your own psyche, of nature, and of consciousness itself, that your soul, who you truly are, is waiting to be discovered. And so in light of this, the fundamental task of the wanderer in the cocoon is to leave the home of the adolescent personality, which is the culture task, and explore the mysteries of consciousness, which is the nature task. And to describe the entrance into the stage, Bill Plotkin writes, or once you thought life was primarily about social, academic, economic, or religious projects, now you recognize it for the spiritual adventure that it really is. And it makes sense in this society where science is king and anything even remotely spiritual sounding is dead, that we've forgotten this. That precisely by exploring the mysteries of consciousness, nature, and of our own psyches is how we actually find who we truly are. Many indigenous cultures knew this, where the young person, the adolescent, upon reaching a certain age, would be sent out into the wilderness alone, on a vision quest, a walkabout, a rite of passage to fast, to pray, to sit with the darkness and the silence and the terror of being completely alone with themselves, stripped of every social comfort and every familiar identity, for the very purpose of encountering something deeper than the personality. And sometimes they would be out on these vision quests for weeks, for months, for years, and some of them, a small percentage of them, would never even return. But these indigenous cultures were still willing to risk this loss because they saw this task as very necessary for the well-being of the entire community. They saw it as something like a cocoon where nature, the earth, holds you within this transformational container where your ego, your adolescent personality dissolves and you are born again into your true adult form that has a particular unique gift to give both to the human community that you are part of and also to the larger fabric of life, because to the very earth herself, because the earth herself needs you. She needs your soul, or else nature cannot complete itself. Nature cannot be itself fully without your very soul. And now I want to usher us into contemplation on what a human being really is and what we are meant to be, because again, like I mentioned earlier, if you go out into deep nature, you study science and have a basic understanding of ecology, what you'll come to understand and see viscerally is that everything is fundamentally interconnected to and interdependent on everything else. And us humans are not at all excluded from this. Every species has a unique role, a unique task, and a unique gift to give to the larger fabric of life in order to serve the well-being of the whole ecosystem and really the entire biosphere and the entire earth itself. But again, what us humans are doing, because we are locked in a stage of early adolescence and thus we are not embodying our true adult form, is that we have become a cancer to the entire ecosystem, to the entire fabric of life, and that is why everything is in danger. That's why our biosphere is collapsing, why we are in a sixth mass extinction, and why we are living in a meta crisis. And so what this forgotten stage of development is having us do by exploring the mysteries of consciousness, nature, and psyche is nudging us to dissolve our adolescent identity and become one with nature, the earth, and I'd even say the cosmos at large again, to become an ensouled cell within the organism that is all of life, serving the whole, stewarding the whole, shepherding the whole, imagineering the whole in service of love, truth, beauty, and goodness. This is what humans are destined to become in my eyes. The soul-embodied, world-centric, heart-opened, visionary stewards, caretakers, and imagineers of life. It's our destiny. And it's by first listening to the signs that soul is giving us, by feeling into the quarter life or midlife crisis that may be present, where you can feel an ache you can't quite name, but you know something is wrong, that there's more to life than what you're living now. Maybe you realize you hate your job and it doesn't fulfill you despite paying well. Maybe you feel bored by your social group, which is repeating the same drama and same conversations over and over and over again, and you long for something deeper and more true. Maybe your romantic relationship is no longer serving you. All of these, in Plotkin's eye, are nudges from soul. And what I found in my own soul journey, which I'll speak extensively on here in a minute, is that the heart is the portal to your soul. And what I mean by that is both what absolutely breaks your heart, crushes your heart, where your greatest suffering is your portal to soul, and simultaneously, on the other side of the coin, it's also your heart's deepest bliss. It's what makes you come alive and pulsate with infectious, vivacious, soulfully alive energy is also where your soul is at. But given that we are ushered into the wanderer in the cocoon, usually through crisis, especially in this society where we don't have many true adults or true elders who can help us through this process, is that we will be ushered into the cocoon through deep heartbreak by finally feeling all of that suffering and all of that grief that we've kept at bay. And to illustrate this stage more, I want to talk about my own journey of going into the cocoon. So I've talked about this on my channel a couple times before, but when I was 16 years old, I was in love. I was as deeply in love with a girl to the highest degree that my current level of development at that time would allow for, which of course, at age 16, it's riddled with projections and fantasies and all sorts of selfish biases and whatnot that is like completely unconscious to me at this time. But all goes to say is that I was completely enamored by her, completely in awe by her. To me, she made life worth living. And being with her was the greatest joy I had known up to that point in my life. And in addition to that relationship just absolutely flooding me with all these ecstatic and joyful emotions, it also made me feel quite good about myself on an identity level too. Because, I had this identity that I was this basketball player, that I was pretty smart and intellectual, I had good grades, and I believed myself to be destined to get into a prestigious university. And this relationship for me was like the cherry on top. I felt like it completed everything and it made my entire world go round. And I thought we would get married one day and have beautiful children and live happily ever after. To me, I had it all. But one day, quite suddenly and quite unexpectedly as well, she broke up with me. And I remember the exact moment it happened. It was through a text message of all things as well. And in the moment, my heart, it just shattered. I felt it literally in my heart. It just completely shattered. I was in so much agony that I laid on my bed for many days, mostly just in a fetal position, and I had also found out shortly after the breakup, like maybe only 4 or 5 days later, that she had been cheating on me and that she was already with another person. And this just broke me even deeper, and it pretty much just like collapsed that entire stable ego structure I had of being this cool, smart guy, this deep and intellectual guy, this basketball player. And it ushered me into the feeling that I was completely worthless, had absolutely no value as a human being, that no one would ever love me, or that no one would ever love me in the way that I wanted to be loved. And my atheistic belief system at this time told me that life is inherently meaningless, that there is nothing higher and truer to live for, that the universe is just this cold, inanimate object, and that living life as a human being is just an accident that I now saw that I didn't ask for, and an accident that I now was beginning to feel because the suffering was so deep that I didn't even want to be a part of anymore. And of course, while I didn't realize this at the time, I had put my entire sense of self-worth and well-being into this girl liking me. And when she wasn't giving me that validation and support and love anymore, my entire ego structure just kind of collapsed. And of course, breakups are normal, but this was like a very extreme form of suffering that was not at all just like the breakup. I mean, I thought at the time it was just the breakup that was the reason for this, but now that I have much more awareness of how my psychological patterns and how psychology works and just how human development works, I of course now see that there are much deeper reasons in the soup that is my psyche that was at fault for me rapidly entering into a deeply depressed, suicidal, idealizing state, a state that I remained in for the better part of 6 months or so. And the reason that this was so painful, right? It's not just like the breakup itself. The breakup was kind of a catalyst that opened some things that were kind of beneath the surface, stuff that was kind of from earlier stages of development in my life, stage 1 and stage 2. Emotions also, which my stage 3 ego and loyal soldier had prevented me from feeling. The ego structure collapse was now bringing all of that up to the surface. And while I won't go too deep into the deeper trauma that happened earlier on in my life, I will say that it had to do with abandonment wounds, specifically abandonment wounds regarding my mother. That in this romantic relationship I had when I was 16, this exiled part of my psyche projected onto her and gripped close and held near and dear for its nourishment and well-being. There were also earlier wounds at play here, father wounds and not feeling good enough and capable enough as a man. And so all of that was kind of like in the soup. And so all of that kind of very painful material, which my psyche had exiled, came bursting into the surface with this breakup. And it was just too much for me to hold and to bear. Like I said, I was in the fetal position for many days, basically rocking back and forth. And for several months thereafter, I was deeply depressed, feeling that I am unlovable, that I am worthless, like I don't matter. And when these feelings were particularly strong, yes, I was idealizing suicide. And I remember like being in class one time in my junior year of high school, not at all paying attention to the class. I was just on my phone researching the most effective and least suffering-inducing ways to end my life. And while I never actually made any real plans to do this, there was a 3-month or so period in that winter where it was really, really, really bad. And so, we can say this is like a full-blown heartbreak that revealed some things beneath the surface that were all kind of combining together to yield this, experience of immense suffering. And I felt all of that in my heart. It shattered my heart. But what I also realized in hindsight is that this cracking of my heart actually opened up a portal for me to go deeper inside myself, and not just my own psyche, my own personal self, but also the universe, the cosmos at large, because it turns out that the heart can hold all of that. It does hold all of that. Your heart is beating with the rhythm of the earth, and your heart is a part of the one beating heart that is the cosmos, my friend. And that your heartbreak, your suffering, your existential crises that maybe you're going through, maybe that you watching this are going through, is a means for you to discover who you truly are, the love that you are at your core. So this is just the first part of the story, but now allow me to proceed. So before the heartbreak happened, I was super enmeshed within and fused with my cultural surroundings. I wanted to be this goody two-shoes. I strived to excel academically. I strived to excel in sports. I had aspirations to go to a prestigious university. I never did drugs. I had never drank alcohol or smoked weed or did anything up to that point. I was a pure Thespian at the Oasis, completely conforming, completely fashioning myself to fit in within the culture. But after the heartbreak, I didn't give a shit about pretty much any of that anymore. Like I said, I was suicidal. I was ready to give it all up and let it all go. And so when I didn't have this as rigid ego structure trying to control everything, I naturally became more loose and more open in my expression. I changed my style a little bit to just be a little bit more edgy. I began to desire to try things like alcohol and smoke weed. And when I did smoke weed for the first time when I was 17, I felt like I was accessing deeper parts of my psyche, and this just fascinated me. Whereas I was previously interested in math and science, the STEM stuff, which culture had implanted into me, I now became interested in psychology, philosophy, and spirituality. My rigid atheism gave way to an open agnosticism. And while I was idealing suicide, and when I imagined ending my life, the atheist framework will tell you that it just lights out, that there's nothing after death. And honestly, that lights out, that experience of pure nothingness, is honestly where I wanted to be when my suffering was really bad. I just wanted to kind of like pop out of existence and just like vanish. But it was in contemplating that I actually began to question it. Thinking, well, is it really lights out after death? Or could there be some form of afterlife, some form of consciousness that transcends this human physical plane of existence? So I told myself, all right, well, before I do it, before I make any real plans to unalive myself, I at least have to try and find out if it's true or not. Is it really lights out or not? And so that's why I got all into this philosophy and spirituality initially. And I was doing research and I heard all about how people were describing how they literally experienced God when they did psychedelics. And I was looking this up, doing all sorts of research on the internet. And I was like, oh shit, man, like I'm gonna have to find out if this is actually true. And then I did go find out if it is actually true. And so then I began my series of psychedelic journeys with both the substances LSD and psilocybin when I was 18 years old. And during this apprenticeship to LSD and to the mushroom, which is the epitome of the wanderer exploring the mysteries of consciousness and psyche, I had about 15 to 20 solo experiences in a 1-year span or so. And after that, my life was never, ever, 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 ever the same again. My entire atheistic, even agnostic worldview was just obliterated. And I don't use that word lightly. I mean that the very fundamental assumptions that I had been carrying about what reality is, about what I am, about what consciousness is, about the very nature of existence itself, all of that was blown wide, wide open. And so I actually have a whole video on this like really, really big experience that changed everything for me. I can leave a card to it on the screen if you're interested in watching that. But essentially what happened was, and I'll just explain like the biggest experience. There were a lot of there was a number of experiences that were deeply impactful, but I'm going to try to explain this as clearly and succinctly as I can, because these experiences are truly ineffable. You know, words can never encapsulate how they really are. But in one of my particularly high-dose sessions, I experienced myself, my sense of I, my sense of being Wyeth, a human being, as moving closer and closer and closer to an infinitely clear, infinitely luminous, infinitely loving, infinitely knowing, clear, bright, white light that I can only describe as the source of everything. You could call it God. And it didn't have a form, it was completely formless, but this clear, luminous, loving, intelligent white light was increasingly pervading my entire consciousness. And as it was pervading my entire consciousness, my ego, my sense of I, my sense of being a human, of being Wyeth, was dissolving. And as this was happening, I lost memory of my human life. I had a slight sense of still being a separate entity still, but as I was increasingly dissolving into this bright white light, into God, into Source, I knew that if I was going to fully merge with this, to become one with it, that I was going to die and that I would no longer be human anymore. And what's crazy is that I did not at all feel scared by this. It actually felt so fucking right, so alive, so aligned, so true to fully merge into Source and leave my human life behind. And I actually experienced this like increasing dissolving into the white light as intense, as deeply, deeply pleasurable, pulsating sensations throughout my entire body while this was going on. It was like God, the creative force of the cosmos, was moving through me, penetrating me, and it felt so, so good. It was like I was moving towards an orgasm, but not a genital orgasm, but like a full body, like infinite orgasm, that if the energy broke, I would be released from my human self and become one with Source forever. And so in this experience, the energy was building and building and building, and it felt like so good. I was drowning more and more and more in infinite love. I was getting downloads about how the universe is one being and we are all parts of that one being, and that this being has been waiting billions of years for its children, manifesting in the form of us humans, the very offspring of billions of years of the universe's process, to finally wake up to itself and to know itself as that, as God, as love, as Source, as beauty, as truth, as inherent goodness. And as the energy was building, as I was drowning more and more and more in the love, I felt so safe. I felt so secure. I felt so okay in letting it all go and surrendering my human life and dying into love, into union with the universe, with God. And then, as the energy was right at the breaking point, which had me fully convinced I'd leave my human life behind and I'd be one with Source forever, as soon as I was about to go fully into that, the energy died back down, and slowly fragments and memories and thoughts of my human life returned, and I gradually made my way back to a stable human ego consciousness. But as this journey from Source back to ego consciousness was unfolding, I also just started getting downloads that made my heart just like pulsate with joy and the intuitive recognition of truth. The piercing insight I got when something like, and it felt like the deep intelligence of the universe was speaking directly to me, and it went something like, "Young one, you really thought I was going to take you home at 18 years old? Come on now, this is where we're all going eventually, back into the pool of infinite love from which we are all born. But you have work to do here on earth. Go bring me and all of my love and all of my goodness into the world. Make me, make love visible. Go and help others remember what you just experienced." And I felt such like immense warmth in my heart. It welled up in my heart upon the recognition of this message, because it felt like, and it was like, I had just received the why of my life's purpose. Not even like my life's purpose, but just like the purpose of life itself, to align with the self-transcending drive of the cosmos that is always moving towards this, and to help others do the same, participating in the movement of consciousness towards greater liberation, freedom, openness, wholeness, unity, and love. And ever since that moment, I've been trying to do that to the very best of my ability. But I have to be honest with you now, it's been hard. It's been really, 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 really fucking hard. It's been lonely. It's been a very difficult process, because in our current adolescent society, we have very few true adults and true elders who can guide us into true soul embodiment. And I didn't even know the distinction between spirit and soul at this time, which if I had a soul guide or some like spiritual mentor who could have helped me, it could have spared me the years of loneliness and wrong turns and being activated by my shadow patterns. Because I want to tell you something really important here. This powerful psychedelic experience that I had that completely changed my life forever was actually not an experience of soul. It was actually an experience of spirit. And when we say spirit, we mean the inherent oneness and unity and love that the cosmos is and is always moving towards in its evolutionary process. It's God. But when we say soul, we mean the individualized unit of consciousness, the human vessel that is a conduit for spirit, for spirit's love. And each soul, each individual human, has its unique way of doing that, based on its unique powers, talents, interests, curiosities, joy points, and also forms of alchemized pain and suffering. And so in this, I had an experience of spirit, getting in touch with the ultimate purpose of life and of the universe, but I didn't actually receive any insight on my particular unique role within this larger unfolding. And so that's why I say it was not an experience of soul. But nonetheless, this experience of spirit was very powerful. It made me no longer depressed at all, for the most part. It gave me a deep knowing in my bones that I can trust reality, that reality has my back. I knew the purpose of life, which is to give love. And this was huge for me. It was a genuine, powerful spiritual awakening. And this is where I want to make a distinction also between the two types of awakening. The type that I had in this experience was what we can call an up and out kind of awakening, where you kind of like rise above your body and humanness and merge into the source of everything, the oneness that is everything. And this type of awakening is what is most common that people experience, because in this type of awakening, you can awaken to your true nature without fully embodying it. You kind of learn to like rise above your pain, your wounding, and your trauma. And in this, you can experience like very profound states of peace and love and unity consciousness without actually healing all of the stuff that's in the basement, that's in the shadow, that's in the subconscious mind. And this is what's often called spiritual bypassing, using the transcendent experience, the up and out experience, as a way to avoid the descent into the messy, painful, particular, deeply personal territory of your own wounds, your own shadow, your own unmetabolized grief and rage and shame and all of these things. And I have to tell you, I fell into this. I fell into this very hard, because for a while after this experience, and still to this day to a degree, I was walking around in this like very elevated state, feeling like I had it all figured out. My ego genuinely inflated in light of this experience. I was feeling like I had just received the answer. Just love everybody, just be one with everything, just stay connected to source. And I genuinely believe that would be sufficient, that I could just hover above my humanness in this beautiful spiritual space and everything would be fine. But it wasn't fine because after the experience, I continued to be governed by my wounds, my pain, my shame, my shadow. I still had pretty low self-confidence from the breakup that had just now happened a couple years ago. At that point, I was addicted to porn. I even spent the next couple years mostly tending to stage 3 tasks, building up a healthy sense of self-esteem, going to university, and being a little bit of a hoe, becoming the hero on the intramural basketball team and winning a championship, and also entering into another romantic relationship, which I am so grateful for, and which was so nourishing for me and for her in the 2 years that we were together, because both of us did a lot of healing and being together, because the love was very true and very genuine. That's always a healing, nourishing thing. But then after university, you know, we broke up, and also like after university, you're ushered into the real world. And university only really teaches you how to be a cog in the capitalist machine, for the most part. I'm not saying that there aren't some great professors out there that can't truly open a portal to their student's soul. But anyways, like, so now I felt again like I had to figure it all out for myself again. I knew I wanted to serve love and serve the evolution unfolding towards that. But what was my unique way of doing that exactly? That's my task that I had now been trying to fashion, and that I have been fashioning ever since, my soul-aligned work in the world. And it's also been in this time that I became very aware of my shadow patterns. I became aware that I was spiritually bypassing and how much that was hurting me. And so I got into shadow work. I did a lot of shadow work practices. And the most powerful thing for me in this has been feeling my grief and also feeling the deep-seated shame I've held about myself for so many years. Internal family systems therapy has really helps me a lot, specifically somatic internal family systems therapy. And also, this is probably the most powerful thing, MDMA therapy, which is a huge heart opener. And also learning heart-mind meditation from my teacher, Dr. John Churchill, which I kind of have a video that alludes into that. 2 videos ago I created it. It's called, "Is Your Meditation Practice a Form of Avoidance?" And it goes into how to meditate from the heart. I can leave a card to that if you're interested. But anyways, through doing these MDMA sessions and feeling my pain and my grief and like getting in touch with like old wounds that I had like kind of forgotten about, but like I didn't realize how profoundly that it impacted me, and even in like day-to-day life. But after doing this, I've come to experience like the other type of awakening we can call it. It's not really like quite like an awakening to spirit. It's not the up and out awakening to spirit, but it's more like the down and in awakening that leads you to your soul, where love pierces into the darkest corners and caverns of your psyche that hold your most vulnerable and wounded parts, bringing them back into the light of loving awareness, back into the inner kingdom that is your psyche. And what I've learned is that this down and in form of awakening, it happens through the heart. And I don't just mean heart in terms of biological heart that pumps blood and oxygen throughout your entire body. I'm talking about this more from a subtle body perspective, from a chakra perspective, the spiritual heart, the heart chakra, which is the organ of divine perception that pumps love and goodness and beauty into the web of life, ensouling life in the process. Like the way the human soul actually comes to fruition is by the heart chakra being open. You're just pumping love into the whole web of life. That's how us humans do it. So that's how life gets ensouled by us humans, is through the heart. And what's interesting is that it's said in many mystical traditions that the soul does abide in the heart. And even from a chakra perspective, this makes a lot of sense, because as you can see here on the screen, the heart chakra is the median chakra. It's the 4th chakra out of 7. It is the mediator. It's the bridge between the lower, more earthly, more embodied chakras, the root, the sacral, the solar plexus, which deal with survival, sexuality, desire, power, the raw animal energy of being a creature on this earth. And like we could say ego stuff is what the lower 3 chakras deal with. But the heart is the bridge between the ego stuff, and it's the bridge between the upper, more transcendent chakras, the throat, the 3rd eye, and the crown, which deal more with the infinite, with spirit, with source. And the heart is what sits right in the middle. It's the bridge. It's the place where heaven and earth meet, where spirit, God, source, and the human kiss, where the universal descends and the human ascends, and they find each other in the heart. They come into union and they engage in a divine love story, giving birth to a new offspring, which is your soul. You see how this works? And so this down and in form of awakening, where the love from your heart is extending downwards into your lower chakras, your humanness, where all of your wounds, pain, and traumas resides, it's precisely this love is what allows the wound, the pain, the suffering to be alchemized into a gift for greater service in the world, where the thing that just breaks your heart, that has broken your heart so many times, becomes the very ache that you seek to mend in the world. And so when I had this down and in awakening for the first time on my 25th birthday, by the way, which was the greatest gift I have ever received in my entire life, the gift of love from myself to myself. And the love just pierced so deeply inside these wounds, the wounds of abandonment that I spoke about earlier, also wounds of not feeling good enough, not feeling capable, powerful, big, capable enough. That existed both because of childhood and adolescent family dynamics, but also perpetrated by the world at large as well. And all of that was felt more fully and also loved so deeply. It literally viscerally felt like this age 6 part of me that harbored this abandonment wound surfaced up in me, in my own heart, and I, as the heart, as meta-loving awareness, as the loving, wise parent of myself, I actually soothed that part of myself and attuned to it and assured it that it would never, ever be abandoned again. And when this exiled part of me felt this, my heart just swelled and swelled with love. It felt like the sun piercing through glaciers which had been frozen for thousands of years. And it was in this love extending into the darkest caverns of my psyche that I uncovered a mysterious potentiality, a boon perhaps, and welling directly out of the spring that is my heart. Like literally I felt this in my heart somatically, and I felt it as like a direct, intuitive, clear, piercing insight that said, you're a heart warrior. And that's all the insight was, but it made my heart swell with this like deep internal knowing that like whatever that means, I still don't even really know what that means, is somehow a core piece of my soul identity. And the visions I was getting of this heart warrior archetype as the knowing landed in my being, which like reverberated chills throughout my entire body, was like this like integrated masculine archetype who courageously fights for and serves love, someone who's fully in touch with his anima, with his feminine side, the watery and emotional dimensions of existence, but is simultaneously carrying a fucking sword, the sword of truth that will slice through all of the illusion, all of the ego's lies, all of the culture's bullshit, and not even in a cruel, aggressive way either, but with a fierce and unwavering and fully loving devotion that says, no, I will not let you stay small. I will not let us stay small. I will not let you hide from yourself. I will not let the false stay standing when the true, the good, the beautiful is ready to emerge. And at the same time, this warrior is holding, the whole time, it's holding an open heart. It's all in service of love, a heart that has been broken so many times that it has become permanently open. I'm not saying my heart's always open. I'm totally working on that. But not hardened by the breaking, in essence, but opened by the breaking. A heart that can sit with someone in their darkest moment and not flinch. A heart that can witness the full catastrophe of human suffering and not look away, not spiritually bypass it, not even rush to fix it, but just be with it fully, tenderly, fiercely. And in that moment, living into this archetype felt like a tall task, because it would force me directly into all of the wounds that had been carved into my psyche and in my somatic body, the abandonment wounds and the heart closure from the abandonment wounds, stepping fully into my power and fiercely, devotedly, unshakably living in this way. And even to this day, it feels like a tall task. I don't even feel like I embody the heart warrior archetype super deeply right now. There's so many ways I shy away from the moment. I isolate myself out of fear. I still very much get activated by these wounds from time to time, although less than before. But still, when I receive that mythopoetic identity, or at least I'll say like a piece, that the archetype feels like a piece of my soul identity. It just like felt in the moment so true to me that my body like literally reverberated with chills in that moment. And ever since then, it's become my North Star that I seek to live into more and more and more every single day. And so now to go back into the theory side of things, because I know I talked, for a while about my personal story there. But in essence, that whole story I just shared was like the several-year story of me being in stage 4, the wanderer in the cocoon, where I was ushered into the mysteries of consciousness and psyche and nature to discover the treasures, the boons that reside there, pick them up, and then bring them back to the human culture so that life becomes more beautiful, whole, and complete because my soul is now in it. My soul is leading. And by the way, I still kind of think I am in the cocoon. I resonate both with being in like the late stage of the cocoon, stage 4, and also being in stage 5, the apprentice at the Wellspring, where one becomes wholly devoted to bringing forth the soul's gifts to the world, because I still feel like I have some cocoon tasks to complete, a good amount more shadow work to do, and I have this like calling to live in a van and travel around to all these beautiful nature places as I do this, and like wander just in nature kind of by myself. So that's like a bit of a wandering vibe, but also I see how so much of my life right now is just fully devoted to bringing my soul's gifts into life more and trying to find the right and most powerful delivery systems in order to do this, through my videos, through my coaching, through the Soul Emergence Collective, which is a community I started with, a course that contains over 30 hours of video content with weekly group calls, weekly meditation hours, all devoted to the sacred task of discovering and embodying our souls and bring the unique gifts that we have to offer to the world to life. So if that resonates with you, I'd love to see you in the community. Love, love, love to see you there. But yeah, like I'm seeking right now to find the right delivery systems. I'm seeking to embody this more and more in my day-to-day life because I still do close down in many, many ways. But in essence, this is what happens in the cocoon, where you kind of like discover your soul identity, what you're meant to do, what you're destined to do, and then you kind of apprentice yourself to doing that in stage 5. And for Bill Plotkin, when he was 30 years old, he was on a vision fast in the mountains. And if you're familiar with the practice of vision fasting, I've never done it personally, but from what I hear, it has a tendency to kind of open a portal to the underworld and bring up all the things you'd rather not look at, but need to look at, of course. And it can like literally induce like profound mystical experiences from what I hear. But for Plotkin, when he was on a vision fast in the mountains, he wrote about how when he was at the peak of his fast, a butterfly flew up to them, landed on his cheek as if it was kissing him, and in a sudden, direct, piercing, intuitive knowing, the butterfly or his psyche or the earth or which one is it really, you don't know. But anyways, the piercing insight of cocoon weaver came to him. And as he had this insight, which he describes like hearing his true name for the first time, he was washed over with joy and delight. And although he didn't know it at the time what cocoon weaver even meant, he knew it was a core part of his soul identity. And as he lived into this knowing that he is a cocoon weaver, he realized eventually that his role is to create containers of transformation where the old, outdated, used up adolescent identity can dissolve in service of the adult, heart-opened, world-centric, soulful identity, just like the adolescent caterpillar dissolves within the chrysalis, giving birth to the adult form, the butterfly. And Bill Plotkin has been doing this for like 40 years or so at the organization he founded called Animus Valley Institute, where he leads groups of people on vision fasts through the wilderness where they can safely, with support and with ceremony and with rites of passage, make the passage into true, soulful adulthood. And he says it doesn't always happen that someone receives like a mysterious mythopoetic identity, such as cocoon weaver or heart warrior or whatever it is, but he says that soul encounter can take on many different forms. Like sometimes it comes as a clear, piercing name like that, cocoon weaver, a mythopoetic identity that just like lands in you with like a force of revelation. But other times it arrives more gradually, more subtly. It might come as a recurring dream image that you can't shake. It might come as a particular quality of feeling that arises whenever you're in deep communion with a certain landscape or a certain element of the natural world. It might come as a body sensation, a warmth, a tingling, a swelling in your chest. It might show up consistently whenever you're in the vicinity of soul's territory. It might come as a poem that just writes itself through you, like the universe was writing itself through you. It might come as a series of synchronicities that are so specific and so persistent that you can't dismiss them as mere coincidence. And sometimes for some people, the soul encounter doesn't come as like a single dramatic moment at all. It might come as a slow, gradual crystallization where over months or years of deep inner work and nature immersion, a pattern begins to emerge, a shape begins to form in the fog, and one day you look at it and you're kind of like, this is what I am, this is who I am. It was assembling itself this whole time. I just couldn't see the whole picture until now. And Plotkin emphasizes that whatever form the encounter takes, the soul image is always ecological and it's always worldly. It always has to do with your relationship to the more than human world, your place in the larger web of life. It's never purely psychological. It's never purely social. It's not like I'm a good communicator or I'm meant to be a leader. Those are both social roles. They're ego descriptions. The soul image has roots in the earth. It speaks in the language of nature, of elements, of animals, of landscapes, of seasons, of the wild forces that move through all things. Cocoon Weaver is not a job title. It's a mythopoetic identity. It places Plotkin in a direct relationship with the metamorphic and evolutionary process of nature itself. Heart Warrior is not a career description, it's a mythic identity that connects my particular way of being to archetypal forces that are as old as the human species. And your soul image or set of images, whatever it turns out to be, will have that same quality. It will feel ancient and it will also feel new at the same time. Ancient because it's tapping into something primal, something that lives in the deep structure of the cosmos and of Earth's intelligence and in the collective human psyche. And it's also new because it has never existed in exactly this form before, the form which is you. And so that part is critical to emphasize, that the soul is always ecological and it's always worldly, because a true human adult moves through the world with a primarily world-centric orientation where they are tending to and living in service of everyone in the whole fabric of life. If the identity isn't world-centric, then the cocoon is not complete. And if your identity already is world-centric, there still probably is a lot of cocoon tasks to complete, because you have to discover who you are in service of the whole world, in service of all of life. You can have world-centric political opinions and economic views and things like this, and that's great. That's better than the adolescent script. But if you're still not bringing your soul, your deepest nature into life, then you still have cocoon tasks to complete. But if you're feeling the call into the cocoon to something beyond your stable ego identity, or the identity of your first adulthood, as many people call it, then you, my friend, have some wandering to do. You have some exploring of the mysteries of consciousness, nature, and psyche to do. And the first thing to get started with this entering of the cocoon, is to simply answer the call. It doesn't mean you have to leave your job behind or end your relationship. Maybe it does mean that. It genuinely might. But it first starts with simply just feeling yourself, with fully being with all parts of yourself and just like sitting with yourself and not being in this like egoic pushing and striving orientation where you're trying to always reach the imaginary golden nugget at the end of the tunnel, and like you always are like super like nervous system just regulated, trying to like go on the hamster wheel and your consciousness is narrowing and things like this. You want to end the egoic pushing and striving orientation in service of a slower, soulful, being and allowing orientation where you just let yourself be as you are, express as you are, allow what wants to emerge. And that probably begins with first admitting that you are experiencing the call, that something about your current life isn't working. And like I said, the task isn't to quote unquote figure it out with the ego. I've tried to do so much figuring it out in my head, in my life, but it never really works. It never really does anything. Instead, you need to go slow. You need to let yourself wander, to let yourself be moved. And in this, stillness, silence, and solitude is the key. And so what you can do first to get started is to spend time in deep nature, not the town park, not a walk around the marina, but deep nature where there are virtually no signs of human influence and you become fully embedded in the wild, and simply just be there. No one but yourself and the earth. Just by doing this, there's already something psychoactive happening in your psyche. Deep nature has a psychoactive effect naturally on our psyches because it ushers us back into our wholeness, our fullness, our wildness. And so as you're wandering in deep nature, don't even have a podcast in your ears, don't go with a friend, don't listen to music, don't have anything you can do to distract yourself, don't have an agenda, don't even really have a destination, don't have any goals in mind. Simply just be with yourself. Allow yourself to wander. That's all it takes to first begin this process of stage 4. But to go deeper, there are a few particularly potent practices that you can do in order to accelerate the process. Firstly, you can begin a dream practice. Every morning, instead of waking up and immediately going on your phone or beginning your day with whatever you normally do, Record your dreams in a dream journal, because literally your dreams are your unconscious mind, your subconscious mind, the underworld, which is where your soul resides, speaking to you, nudging you, calling you. And what's so sad is that because people don't pay attention to their dreams, that they have no idea that their soul is speaking to them, and they lose deeper and deeper touch with who they are. And what's important is that you don't try to analyze or decode your dream too much. It's not really effective if your ego is just analyzing the dream, because all that is going to happen is that the ego is going to interpret the dream through its preordained belief system, which naturally upholds the survival of the ego structure. And what happens in the journey to soul is that much of your ego structure dissolves and reorganizes itself around the soul's leadership. So what Plotkin advocates for is a more soul-centric approach to dream work, where instead of trying to figure out what the dream means from your ego's perspective, you enter into a relationship with the dream. You let the dream images live in you. You carry them throughout your day. You let them affect you, move you, haunt you. Even, you might practice what Carl Jung called active imagination, where you kind of close your eyes and you consciously re-enter the dream landscape, or even working with any waking images that you may be working with, and just kind of let those images continue unfolding, not directing it, not controlling it, but participating in it, letting the dream figure speak, letting the landscape of the dream reveal what it wants to reveal, entering into dialogue with the dream characters, asking it questions, and genuinely listening for the answers that arrive from somewhere deeper than your thinking ego mind. And over time, as you build this practice, as you develop a real relationship with your dream life, you start to notice patterns, recurring images, recurring landscape, recurring figures, recurring themes. And these patterns are not random. You will find that they are the soul's way of slowly, patiently, persistently communicating its nature to you in the only language that it speaks fluently, which is the language of image and symbol and myth. And by the way, I find the combo of dreams and also deep nature to be insane. Like, I've had some of the most profound, moving, and soul-stirring dreams of my life while camping out in nature. So utilize those two combos for sure in your wandering, especially dreams that happen on a full moon too. It's just something I notice in myself, in my experience, that dreams tend to shout at me a little more whenever it's a full moon. And another thing that needs to happen in the cocoon is to cultivate a relationship with your grief and to allow yourself to feel all of it fully. This ties back into what I said earlier about the heart being the portal to our soul. And our heart, of course, is the seat of love, and all grief really is the mourning of the absence of love. And every person's grief has specific intricacies and contourings and unique shapings in our heart. And what we do by feeling all of our grief is we clean out the channel. And what we do through this is we actually open the heart. We deepen its capacity, because grief is not just the experience of loss, it's the experience of how much you loved and yearned to experience love. The grief is proportional to the love. And when you finally let yourself feel the full weight of your grief, the grief for the relationship that ended, the grief for the parent who couldn't show up for you in the way that you needed them to, the grief for the childhood wonder that was crushed, the grief for the years you spent performing instead of living, the grief for the world. And what we're actually doing is reopening the channels through which love flows. It's something like undamming a river, to let the grief flood through all of these channels that have been dry for years, sometimes decades even. And as the grief moves through them, it clears them, it washes away the scar tissue, it softens the calcified walls where we were previously closed off to love and just emotionally numbing ourselves. And how it often goes in soul work and soul embodiment is where your deepest grief resides, also precisely where your deepest gift resides. The thing that breaks your heart the most, the thing you can barely look at without just weeping, the suffering in the world that feels personal to you in a way that you can't fully explain. That's not random. That's a signal. That's your soul saying, this pain, this wound, this grief is your territory. This is where your medicine, your unique gift, is needed. This is the ache in the world that corresponds to the ache in your own heart. And you were given this particular heartbreak in this particular shape so that you would become the particular healer that this particular wound requires. So do whatever it takes to feel your grief fully. Go out into the woods, maybe work with a therapist or other practitioner that you trust. Start to talk to yourself or to others about the pain. At least start orbiting the territory of your grief, and slowly yet surely the gravity of your heart, your soul, will put you closer and closer to it. You just have to allow it to wash through you and move through you. Shadow work in general, in just a larger, broader sense, is also extremely important for this work, for the stage 4 task of being in the cocoon. It's crucial for this, actually. It's inseparable from this stage. And by shadow, we mean anything throughout the course of our lives that our ego cast away into the unconscious mind by avoiding to feel or express or allow into our experience because the ego deemed it too dangerous. And this shadow that we have put into our unconscious mind because we didn't want to deal with it in our experience, the shadow hasn't gone away. It still exists and it still operates in your experience. It manifests as patterns of self-sabotage, as unexplainable emotional reactions that seem way too big for the situation, as projections onto other people where you find yourself irrationally triggered by someone and you don't know why. All these addictive behaviors that you can't seem to kick no matter how hard you seem to stop, as recurring relationship dynamics where you keep ending up in the same painful situation but with different people, as that critical inner voice that just tears you apart when you're alone. And all of that is shadow material operating through you without your conscious awareness. And even if you have awareness of it, you don't have awareness of the pattern that's beneath it. You have awareness of the symptom and not the pattern beneath it. And all of that is closing down your deepest aliveness, your joy, your excitement, your soul, ultimately. And for the scope of this video, I won't go too deep into shadow work, but I do have a whole 2-hour video, slightly under 2-hour video about shadow work, which I can have a link to, I'll leave a card to, in order for you to deepen into that. But what I can say here to at least prime you and orient you towards it is to start looking into what triggers you and inquire into why that is. Inquire into all of the pervasive negative habits, perhaps the addictions and the compulsions that you try so hard to stop, but no matter how hard you try, you can't seem to give up. All of these are symptoms of shadow, and symptoms, when we follow the thread of inquiring into them and feeling into them, lead to the root cause that exists in our shadow. That's all I will say here. I suggest reading some books on that. I have a book list on my website which has some books, but just start doing some shadow work research and watch my video. I give a number of book recommendations in there. And as I've said before in talking about the earlier stages, also creative expression is very important. Art, drawing, writing, poetry, singing that emerges truly from the depths in a way that is created raw and freely and unobstructedly with minimal ego influence is going to be powerful for expressing and exploring your depths, which is where the soul resides. I suggest doing this as often as you can because it strengthens the channel from your own depths and your conscious awareness, and slowly yet surely you'll certainly have a deeper connection to your very soul. And this next one I'm going to say here is a suggestion from Bill Plotkin himself, and that is to do a vision fast in nature. What Bill Plotkin does with the organization he founded is he leads 4 to 5 day solo nature immersions where you fast, you eat no food, and you only drink water for, I think it's 4 or 5 days, and there's a preparatory phase beforehand, an integration phase afterhand, so I think the whole thing might be like a 10 to 12 day endeavor. But this is very similar to the way that the cocoon process was carried out in numerous indigenous cultures, where the adolescent wandered into nature by himself, engaged in a conversation between him and nature and the mysterious forces of his own psyche, and he came back, whether weeks or months or a year later, with a gift, a boon, to give to his community, to help the community and the earth herself flourish all the more. And what fasting does is it strengthens and deepens this connection between you and your deepest nature. Apparently, I've never actually tried it, but I've heard a lot of amazing things about it. And this next one I'll say here is kind of similar. It opens up a similar portal, kind of like to the deeper dimensions of your psyche. And the next one is psychedelics, or also known as entheogenic experiences. I've already shared a bit about what LSD, psilocybin, and MDMA opened up for me, and cultures around the world, do things like ayahuasca, peyote, other plant teachers for exactly this kind of initiatory work, and that's been done for thousands of years in various different indigenous contexts. Because what these substances can do is that they dissolve the ego's filters and they open a direct channel to dimensions of consciousness that might otherwise be impossible to access, or might take years to access through like various meditative practices. And also know though that these psychedelics, these practices, they are not substitutes for the slower practice of showing up every day, tending to yourself, listening to yourself, attuning to yourself, listening to the call from your depths, and actually like feeling all of your emotions. Psychedelics, they can reveal a lot powerfully and undeniably, but the real work is what you do afterwards. The integration, the embodiment, the patient, unglamorous practice of actually living into what was shown to you in the experience. And to do that day by day without any substance involved. And of course, psychedelics, they carry real risks. I'm not talking about going and doing psychedelics with your friends and goofing off and doing it at some party or some rave or whatever. And I'm not even demonizing that type of psychedelic use. It can be beneficial. It can be great to do that. But I'm talking about having a safe, intentional container for you to explore your own depths. So if you explore this path, you definitely do a lot of research beforehand, prepare adequately, and have the support and the understanding that the medicine, the psychedelics, they provide glimpses, but then you have to do the work of embodying that glimpse, that experience in your everyday life, or else it'll be completely pointless and it might actually harm you. It might actually develop like a dependency on having these peak experiences to like even like feel anything at all in your life. And the last one I'll say here is to find your people, or at least find a community of people you can trust who are engaging in similar work. Of course, there's a lot about the Cocoon that is deeply, deeply personal, and you will have to spend a lot of time with yourself inevitably. But the work is so much more powerful when you have people who you can talk to, who you can share your soul with in its fullness, and also with guides and with elders who have walked this own path and can provide pointers and tips and can generally just see you deeply and hold all of you. This has been probably the most difficult thing for me about my cocooning process. As I entered the cocoon, I knew I'd have to leave everything behind, that life would never be the same again, that I would never, ever, ever have a normal life, the life that culture was telling me to live, the life that most all of my peers were living. I knew I wouldn't live that. I had to go a different way. And just that knowing was an agonizing process. I doubted myself a lot. I got lost in my head a lot. I took many wrong turns. And if I had an elder, especially in the early process to help me out, the process would have gone a lot smoother. And so this very ache of loneliness that I experienced in the cocoon, especially at the onset of the cocoon, is why I created the Soul Emergence Collective, which is a community of like-minded folks engaging in the work of deepening into our soul embodiments and our soul purposes. I mentioned it a bit earlier. I have some stuff about it on the screen here for you. Definitely check that out if you're interested. But and also I do have a couple slots open currently for coaching. So if you are looking for a more intimate, intensive, yet safe container to carry out this work, look at the pinned message in the comment section. But anyways, guys, that about wraps up stage 4, the wanderer in the cocoon. And in Bill Plotkin's model, this is the stage of late adolescence. So everything that we've talked about up to this point hasn't even been true adulthood. And this is interesting because it's also one of Plotkin's main premises in all of his work, is that the human species will become much healthier if we actually prolong the duration of adolescence. What we have currently is an abrupt transition from adolescence to adulthood. It's not even a true adulthood, really. Where at 18, if you don't go to college, or at 22, if you do graduate college, you're ushered into adulthood within our society. And that's just a very rapid transition. But by adding in this long lost, forgotten stage of development, the stage of late adolescence, we come to see that it's completely normal if it takes a person 25, 30, 35 or more years of life to arrive at a place of true adulthood. And if you're watching this and you're much older than that and you still feel you have cocoon tasks to do, there's absolutely no shame in that, because the world never actually taught you that this was a thing. The world primarily operates at an early adolescent stage and gives virtually no one the resources and the knowledge needed in order to become a true adult. And because human society is at a stage 3 early adolescent stage of development, it naturally makes me wonder too what the collective transition into the cocoon could look like. And I think we actually kind of are beginning to experience it a bit too. More and more people are waking up to the fact that our current mode of operation as a human species is not at all working. It's actually catastrophic. We are destroying the earth and we're destroying each other. And I honestly believe that it is going to take us to collectively experience the suffering that our current mode of operation is causing us before we have the motivation to change it. Lots of people are waking up though, and we need more people to keep waking up. And there's simply just no better way to contribute to this collective metamorphosis than your own individual metamorphosis, growing down into your own soul, devoting yourself to the very thing that you were born to do, giving love, giving a gift to the more than human community at the exact intersection where your heart's deepest bliss, joy, aliveness, and excitement mends an ache in the world. And once a person has done lots of wandering and exploring of the mysteries of nature and psyche, they eventually discover their soul, and the call to explore the mysteries, although it never stops completely, ceases to become the person's primary developmental orientation, and they enter stage 5, the soul apprentice at the Wellspring, where one's inner kingdom has made the transition from being ego-led to being soul-led primarily, and now the task is to craft brilliant and effective delivery systems for bringing the soul's gifts into the world. So whether that occurs at 25, 35, or 60 years old, it is at this stage that the individual enters into early adulthood in a psycho-spiritual sense. It is at this stage, Bill Plotkin writes, that embodying your soul, its qualities, images, and story become a first-tier priority for you. To embody your soul is to engage in visionary action, ways of doing and being that breathe new life into the world with or without your conscious intention to do so. To manifest your soul's desires as a political act, one that contributes in the 21st century to the great work. End quote. And by great work, he means the creation of the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible, and to get us collectively out of the slop that is our current industrial growth society. He goes on to write, determining an effective form of embodiment and learning the necessary skills are more the ego tasks than the soul's. The form of embodiment is the delivery system for your soul image or story. The delivery system may be art, architecture, raising children, psychotherapy, gardening, teaching, politics, healing, poetry, dance, or any other practice. And this starts to get at the relationship between ego and soul after soul initiation has taken place. Previously, in early adolescence, the state of the majority of the world, the ego is leading, the ego is in charge. But what we need to understand is that the ego is ultimately a self-preservational mechanism. It can only serve itself. It's finite, it's hollow, and it cannot, by itself, generate the kind of meaning and purpose that a true human life requires. The ego is brilliant at surviving. It's brilliant at navigating the social world, at strategizing, at problem solving, at managing logistics, at getting things done, but it cannot tell you what is worth doing. It cannot tell you why you're here and what you're born to do. And so what happens at stage 5, and this is the fundamental shift that marks the transition into true adulthood, is that the ego doesn't die. It doesn't get destroyed. It doesn't get transcended or left behind or discarded like so many spiritual traditions seem to advocate for. Instead, the leadership within your inner kingdom changes from being ego-led to being soul-led. And this is the greatest thing ever, because now your life has meaning, infinite meaning. You never have to worry about life being meaningless or pointless ever again, because now soul, the love that exists at your core, is leading. And this is how it was always supposed to be. And because the human species is so traumatized and so underdeveloped currently, we've forgotten this. Now the ego becomes the servant to soul at this stage. And remember what we said at the very beginning of the video about the ego being both humanity's greatest treasure and also its deepest curse. The treasure is precisely this: the ego's capacity for conscious action, for skill building, for strategic thinking, for navigating the complexities of the human world. All of that capacity, which was previously in service of self-preservation and social status climbing, now gets redirected into service of something infinitely larger and infinitely more fulfilling. The ego finally gets to do what it was always destined to do, which is to be the vessel through which your soul enters the world. And so this is where the apprentice at the Wellspring archetype that is indicative of stage 5 becomes important, because even though you've had the soul encounter, even though you now know a lot more about who you are at the deepest level, you are still a beginner at living it. You've spent your entire life practicing the loyal soldier's way of being. You've had decades of rehearsal at performing, at fitting in, at optimizing for social approval, but embodying your soul, which naturally is mysterious by its very nature, you have almost zero practice at that. And so stage 5 is an apprenticeship. You've arrived at the Wellspring carrying a gift, a sacred elixir for all of us to drink from, but you still are learning through trial and error, through failure and refinement, how to actually translate the soul's gifts into form, into action, into delivery systems that work. And I feel this a lot in my own life right now, where I'm trying to figure out the best and most effective, yet also most enjoyable forms of giving my gifts to the world that utilize the unique powers I have been given in this lifetime, and also do it in a way that meets my needs financially. And that has been a tall task, a very, very difficult task, even a soul-crushing task in a lot of ways, because what we're being asked to do, at least during this time of civilization, is that we're being asked to embody our soul in a world that is largely devoid of soul. And it takes a lot of strength in order to do this. You have to believe in yourself time and time again, every single day. You have to trust in your heart and soul every single day. And in a world where the easiest paths are often the most soulless paths, this notion of trust in and devotion to your soul is paramount for embodying it every day in life. So for me, right now, my primary delivery systems at the moment are my videos, my one-to-one coaching, and the Soul Emergence Collective community. But I also have aspirations to write fictions, to create a book or film that depicts these very themes I've been talking about today, to craft a beautiful mythic story of the journey to the more beautiful world that the soul of humanity resonates with at a deep level when they hear this story. And to be honest, I've completely shied away from apprenticing myself to the craft of creative writing because I fear that it won't make me any money, and I need money in order to survive. We all do. But also, at the same time, what's also important is to not obsess too much about the specific delivery system. Yes, it is important to choose the right delivery systems, but you also need to make sure day to day, moment to moment, that you actually are embodying and living from your soul each and every moment, that you have your heart open, that you're bringing your deepest passion and aliveness and love forward in your everyday life. So the delivery system doesn't always need to be a huge career change or starting your own business or completely leaving everything about your previous life behind, although it very well may include that. But oftentimes the delivery system is just showing up deeper and truer in your relationships, letting your true self be seen more so that others can actually experience it and be moved by it. In light of this, Plotkin writes, "The apprentice will not identify an appropriate cultural setting for her soul work by consulting a vocational guidance counselor or searching the want ads. She might take a job to keep herself and her family fed, but she won't confuse any job with her real work. She knows she can perform her soul work to some extent at any job because her true work is as much about her way of being as it is her way of doing." And this is so important because at the end of the day, our soul expresses in how we are, in our way of being, how we show up. And if your way of being hasn't changed, then no delivery system that you craft will carry the essence of your soul. What's also important to note at this stage, the stage of early adulthood, is that anyone who has made it here is naturally a cultural visionary. Throughout childhood and adolescence, you are learning the ways of culture and society. You are learning how to be a functioning member of human society as it exists up to this point in time. And now that you are a true adult here in the Wellspring, you are a visionary, a revolutionary, an evolutionary whose task is now to take human culture to a place it's never gone before with your unique soul gifts that have never been seen before and will never exist again after you perish. And I really want to let that sink in because it reframes the entire relationship between the individual and the culture in the first half of life, stages 1 and through 3, because you are being shaped by culture in those stages. You're learning its language, its norms, its values, its rules. You're being socialized. You're fitting in. The culture is the mold, and you are the clay being pressed into it. But in the second half of life, starting here at stage 5, that relationship reverses. You're no longer being shaped by culture. You are shaping culture. You're bringing something into the human world that the human world has never seen before. Your soul's gift is by definition new. It's one of a kind. So you are a visionary, a force of inspiration that brings the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible all the more close. And I just want to acknowledge how rare that is. I believe Plotkin wrote that he estimates that only about 5% of people in today's society ever reach what he calls true adulthood in a psycho-spiritual sense. So this is really profound stuff, guys, like super, super cutting edge, profound stuff. And so for those watching this who resonate with being at the Wellspring stage, or maybe are more in the Cocoon stage, but still are inspired by being in this stage very soon, what you can do is first and foremost is keep returning to the Wellspring, keep returning to the source that connects you to your soul, because I find in the world we live in, it is not at all difficult. It's actually very easy to lose contact with your soul. So keep spending time in deep nature, keep doing the dream work, keep doing the shadow work and feeling all of your grief and all of your shame and the full spectrum of your emotions. Keep up the expression of your creativity, because the single greatest danger at stage 5 is getting so caught up in the doing and building the delivery systems and trying to figure out the career and hustling to make it work financially that you lose contact with the actual beingness of your soul that all that doing was supposed to serve and be an expression of. This has happened to me so many times. And when that happens, the delivery systems, they just start to feel hollow. Life itself starts to feel hollow and kind of dull. The work starts to feel like work rather than like soul expression. You wonder at times, like, what the fuck am I even doing? Like, I get to that point in times when I really feel out of touch with my soul. So this goes to say that even in stage 5, you can still totally be hijacked at times by your ego and your loyal soldier subpersonality or any other subpersonality that might grip you and close down your soul. You are in no ways immune to that in stage 5, although you do have the inner resources here to unblend from those parts of you so that soul is naturally leading more. And regarding delivery systems, you should just start with experimenting. Your intuition will naturally tell you where to go and what you want to express and how you want to express it. It could be some form of artistic expression. It could be starting a business. It could be using your gift of craftsmanship and architecting to build sustainable, ecologically sound homes. It could be being a therapist. Bill Plotkin himself worked as a therapist for a while and then eventually went more into leading Vision Fast, which is similar yet different work. It could be storytelling or herbalism or gardening. Maybe it's photography. Maybe it's holding community gatherings to feel grief collectively or something like that. It could literally be an endless number of things, but you first have to identify what your soul gift really is and what your soul powers really are, and then you can kind of go from there. For me, I believe I have gifts of having a very vivid and visionary future-oriented imagination. I believe I have a gift of having an integrated perception that is naturally synthesizing everything together to see how everything fits together in the big picture so that I naturally have a holistic understanding of anything that I study. And I believe I have a gift of communicating that complexity in a way that lands in a simple way that people can understand. And so naturally, I try to wield those talents into these soul-infused delivery systems that I'm crafting through these videos and through the work that we do in the Soul Emergence Collective, where we are actually doing the work to identify what your unique soul powers are and how you might best bring those to life. And as just like an example, I believe Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. had gifts of prophetic voice and oratorical mastery that he very much utilized in his own soul-infused work and leading the civil rights movement and giving inspiring speeches that people still remember to this very day. Another example, Carl Jung. I believe Carl Jung had a gift of implanted into him that had him devoted to exploring the mysteries of life. I mean, there's even a story about him that how when he was 11 years old, he would go into the attic of his home and start speaking to wooden figures that were there in a secret language. And when he wrote in his autobiography, he said that it wasn't until decades later that he realized that this was the beginning of his dialoguing with the unconscious. And that's something I also notice and what developmental psychologists notice as well. They notice that in the post-conventional stages of development, we could say in the truly adult stages of development, stage 5 and later, on Plotkin's model is that stuff from the pre-conventional stages, the pre-ego stages, return after having gone into the dark in the conventional ego stages. So the stuff that you naturally did in your childhood without anyone telling you to do it could very well be deeply tied to what you're doing when you're doing your soul-infused work in the world. We talk about this a lot in the Soul Emergence Collective because there's a contemplative practice in there that essentially has you going back through your life history to notice what you were doing in childhood before you ever had a fully developed ego, what you stopped doing and why you stopped doing it. And essentially, that is a wholeness reclamation exercise where you're discovering what your soul has actually been up to and wanted to express your whole entire life. And also thinking about work from the lens of soul is so much different than the way conventional society relates to it, because in conventional society, the idea is that you are going to retire one day when you're 65 years old from your work. But when your soul and your work are one, dog, you're never going to retire because life is work and work is life. And of course, your delivery systems for that soul work may change form, but at the end of the day, it's all about bringing your soul into life. That's what it's all about. And that's all it ever will be about from here on out throughout the rest of your life. Giving your soul, giving love, that's what it's all about. You'll never, ever, ever stop doing this as long as you live. And Plotkin also talks about how at this stage, your inner world and your outer world become more unified. At this stage, the apprentice at the Wellspring, it's not like you have this like deeply private inner world anymore that you never, ever, ever share with anyone. When you're at the Wellspring, you're naturally gravitating to places and apprenticing to the crafts where your soul comes to life. So it is here that who you are on the inside and who you are on the outside kind of become one. And this is important because you have to get over the hurdle, over the fear of being seen. And sometimes being seen is so scary. It certainly is and has been for me, I will admit, because you're pouring your heart into something, your soul into something. You're pouring all of who you are into what you're doing now. And I find when that fails to resonate and land with people who you want it to land with, it really hurts, it really stings, but it also provides clarity on who my soul gifts are for and what environment and what kinds of people are best for me to be around in order to help me bring my unique soul to life and just live the greatest life that I possibly can that is in alignment with my soul. So I could go on and on and on about this stage, but I think you get the gist. It is at this stage that you've encountered your soul already, you've gotten in touch with your deepest nature, and it is here that you begin to bring that into life, experimenting with ways to express your soul and to bring your soul's gifts to the world through apprenticing yourself to various crafts and delivery systems. But once you have found a rock-solid delivery system, perhaps through a few or several years of apprenticing and trial and error, eventually you come to fully inhabit your niche, your psychoecological niche within the larger fabric of life, both within the human world and in the more than human world. And your soul never stops speaking to you, nor does it stop unfolding because soul unfolds across the lifespan. It might always nudge you to make a tweak in your delivery system, or maybe it reveals something completely new and you are to give up a certain delivery system in service of that something new. Or maybe it's nudging you to just show up in a deeper and truer way. But as you become rock solid in who you truly are, the need to apprentice yourself to something or someone may not ever go away fully, but is no longer your primary energetic orientation, and you enter into stage 6, late adulthood, the artisan at the wild orchard. And it is here at the onset of stage 6 that one undergoes the passage of induction, which confirms mastery of a delivery system for embodying the soul's powers. And it is here that we enter into the north cardinal direction of the human lifespan. For the north is the direction of midnight, of peak darkness, and this is associated with the season of winter because it is in the winter that one must be rooted, responsible, and efficient in order to survive. Because winter strips everything bare. The leaves are gone, the surface beauty is gone, the warmth is gone, the land is stark and barren, and in order to get through the winter, we must tend to only what is essential, and what is most essential, of course, is your soul. Here, there is no more superficiality. The loyal soldier has long been retired and it doesn't really hijack you much anymore. And it is here that you become even more aware of the immense responsibility that you hold for shepherding and stewarding the human and the more than human community in service of beauty, truth, goodness, and love. And Plotkin calls this stage the artisan at the wild orchard because as the artisan, the apprenticeship is over for the most part. The years of fumbling and experimenting and figuring out your delivery systems, the years of being oscillating between being soul-led and ego-led, the years of trying and failing and trying again, all of that has been refined by time and devotion to something that can only be called craft, soul craft, that is. And this craft is not just the skills you've acquired, although it does include that. The craft is who you've become. And the wild orchard, I just love this image, by the way. Think about an orchard that has been growing for decades. The trees are ancient now. The trunks are thick and gnarled and full of character. The roots go so deep into the earth that no storm can topple them. And the fruit is abundant. It comes forth almost of its own accord, not because the artisan is straining or forcing to produce it, but because a tree that has been growing this long and with roots this deep simply bears fruit naturally. That's what it does. That's what it is. At this stage, for the soul-embodied human, every breath is the delivery system. Every glance, every word, every silence, your entire beingness has become the vessel for the soul's gifts. And the gift of stage 6 to the community is what Plotkin calls seeds of cultural renaissance. And this is where the artisan's work transcends the personal entirely. At stage 5, the apprentice at the Wellspring, your soul work is primarily about you finding your way, discovering the delivery systems, learning to embody your gift, navigating the practical challenges of bringing your soul into the world. But here at stage 6, the work has matured to the point where it begins to truly reshape the culture itself. The artisan's creations, whether they are books, organizations, art forms, communities, ways of teaching, ways of being, these become seeds that plant themselves in the collective psyche and begin to sprout into possibilities that didn't exist before. Plotkin's own work is a perfect example of this. He spent decades as a soul apprentice and then became an artisan, refining his delivery systems, the vision fats, the soulcraft practices, the writing, and those delivery systems have now become seeds that are germinating in thousands of people around the world, shifting the way entire communities understand human development. That's the artisan's power, not just to live a soulful life, but to change the conditions so that others can live soulful lives too. And when I think of other examples of people who have embodied the artisan at the wild orchard, I first think of Carl Jung, who in his late 30s underwent what he called his own confrontation with the unconscious, the genuine, terrifying descent into the underworld of his own psyche, having visions and dialogues with inner figures in a way that his colleagues, and even himself to a degree, thought was madness. And from that cocoon, and in his artisan work that he did thereafter, he brought back an entirely new map of the human soul with archetypes, shadow, individuation, active imagination, dream work, delivery systems that he spent decades refining as an artisan and that are still germinating in the collective psyche a century later. Because every single time someone talks about their shadow or any of the various archetypes that Carl Jung posited, that's Jung's seed, still bearing fruit in the wild orchard that he planted many decades ago. I also think of Viktor Frankl as an example, whose cocoon was not metaphorical, but it was actually literal. He was imprisoned in Auschwitz, stripped of every external identity, every possession, every comfort, and in that absolute darkness, that hell, he encountered something irreducible, essential, that a human being can endure, almost anything if they have a why that transcends survival. And he spent much of his time thereafter as an artisan, refining the delivery system, logotherapy, and writing the book, Man's Search for Meaning, seeds that have now touched millions of lives with the unmistakable power of something that was lived, not just theorized about. Another example I think of is Jane Goodall, who at 26 years old went into the forest of Tanzania with no formal scientific training, but just an unshakable pull towards the wild, which is about as stage 4 wanderer in the cocoon as you could possibly get. And she didn't just study chimpanzees, she entered into a relationship with them. She broke every rule of conventional science by giving them names instead of numbers, by recognizing their individual personalities, their emotions, their social bonds, because she was seeing them not through the lens of detached scientific objectivity, but through the lens of a human being who had fallen in love with the more than human world. And what she brought back from those decades in the forest fundamentally reshaped humanity's understanding of its relationship to the animal kingdom. She dissolved the wall between human and animal in science's eye, and then she spent the next several decades becoming an artisan of the highest order, seeding ecological consciousness into communities all over the world. She planted a wild orchard so vast that its fruit is now nourishing millions of young people who now carry a fundamentally different understanding of what it means to be a creature on this earth because of her sacred work. And I also want to note something else that Plotkin emphasizes about this stage, which is that the artisan's relationship with death deepens significantly here, because you are in the north, you are in winter, you are in midnight, and by this point in your life, you have felt impermanence in your bones. You've watched people that you love die. You've watched chapters of your life come to irrevocable endings. You felt your own body aging, slowing, becoming more fragile. And rather than this making you fearful or desperate, this intimacy with mortality actually sharpens your work. It burns away anything that isn't essential. Every word becomes more precise. Every offering becomes more potent. Every moment becomes saturated with a quality of preciousness that only comes from truly knowing, truly living, truly embodying, not just intellectually, but somatically, that your time is finite. And that preciousness, that awareness of death as a constant companion rather than a distant threat, infuses everything the artisan creates with a depth and an urgency that younger work simply does not possess. And for me personally, I don't resonate with this stage. I'm not there yet, but something about this way of being and way of doing in the world just kind of like lights a fire in me. It lets me know that the very highest contributions that I will make to humanity are still far in the future. It makes me so devoted to playing this infinite game, because that's what this is. This isn't a finite game with a finish line where you win and then it's over. That's the game of our current society. But in the more beautiful world, we play the infinite game, the game where the purpose of playing is to keep on playing, to keep deepening, to keep growing, to keep offering, to keep loving deeper and deeper and truer for as long as you're alive. And you get better at playing the game the longer that you live too. So how's that as a reframe for you? Because our current adolescent society is obsessed with staying and looking young. They say your 20s are the best time of your life, and that if you don't have it all figured out by 30, then you're a failure. But how it's actually supposed to go is that your 20s is the stage of late adolescence where you're wandering and exploring the mysteries of consciousness to discover who you really are. And then the real harvest of all of that is at stage 6, the wild orchard, which comes decades later. And this long view, to have the soulful patience rather than the egoic impatience, that willingness to play the infinite game, that is itself a radical act of resistance against our pathologically adolescent culture that wants everything now, that wants instant results, that measures a human life by how much money they make and how nice their house is and how nice their car is. And this reframe actually makes me hyped to age, because as I age, I'm going to become wiser. I'm going to be able to embody my soul more artfully and more skillfully, that makes the world a better place. And that's what I want. I actually had a few gray hairs just popping up in the past year in my hair, and I was honestly really happy about it. I am so down to be full gray before I am 30 years old. I'm super down for that. I want that to happen. And I naturally think about in the future too, what my greatest contributions will be. The desire to deepen as a coach and to write books, perhaps even an epic fiction series that serves as a heart-opening, mind-expanding, mythic depiction of how consciousness evolves both in individuals but also societies. Maybe playing a role in creating films of the same nature and things like this. But the real thing I look forward to when I think about the future and me becoming an artisan at the wild orchard is becoming an ever-deepening, living, and breathing expression of my own soul. This is what truly lights a fire in my heart. Like, I want to be this. I want to be this as much as I possibly can. I want to apprentice myself to this, which is what I'm doing right now. But anywho, what Plotkin notes, what happens when adulthood is coming to an end and one is entering into elderhood, is that there is less fulfillment in doing the specific delivery system for the soul work that you've been doing for so long. And while you may still engage in that delivery system in elderhood, there naturally starts to be less of an interest in accomplishing things and getting things done, and more of an interest in just being with what is. And when this happens, the individual undergoes the passage of crowning and enters into stage 7, early elderhood, the master in the grove of elders. And it is here at stage 7 that upon crowning, that the individual center of gravity moves from ego-centric or world-centric into a cosmocentric organizing principle, or at least that process begins to happen. It is also here that the individual shifts from being solely in the north cardinal direction to now being in the northeast, slowly making the transition back to the east, back to the very innocence they embodied when they were born. And this movement from north to northeast is significant because you can feel on the wheel how the energy is beginning to lighten. The midnight has passed and the first faint glow of dawn is on the horizon. Not the full sunrise that comes at stage 8, or even at death you could say, but there's a sense that the longest darkness has been traversed and something is beginning to open up again. Something is softening, something is releasing. Whereas in stage 5 and stage 6, the soul apprentice and the artisan's worldview is primarily eco-centric or world-centric, now the master in the grove of elders expands beyond the earth, beyond the human project, beyond even the biosphere, although it is still tending to all of that, but it moves more into a felt relationship with the cosmos itself. In Bill Plotkin's interview with Joanna Macy, who is an influential environmental activist, eco-philosopher, and scholar of Buddhism, someone who Plotkin deemed to be at this stage 7 at the time of the interview, said that she completely gave up the idea that she has to make it happen, and if I don't do it, it's not going to happen. Whereas the truth is that I'm just one element in the mix, or that I'm an agent for the intentions of something mysterious. She goes on to say, "For me, moving into elderhood has been a movement from informing or arguing or persuading or telling to evoking. From informing to evoking, from arguing to blessing, from proving I don't have the slightest interest in proving anything anymore, and not so much in telling either, to hinting, waiting, blessing, or evoking, and I have greater comfort in not knowing." End quote. So it appears what happens here is that there is a significant shift from doing to being, from effort to presence, from the active, creative, generative energy that characterized stage 5 and 6, where you're building, crafting, refining, delivering, into something much quieter, something more spacious, more open and receptive. The elder is no longer trying to make anything happen. They've released the need to control outcomes. They've released the need to convince anyone of anything. They've even released the need to know. And what's left when all of that striving falls away is something incredibly powerful, precisely because it is not trying to be powerful. It's just presence. Undiluted, unhurried, cosmically rooted presence. And the task that Plotkin lifts at this 7th stage of early elderhood is caring. Caring for the human community, but also for the soul of the more than human community, nature as well. To elaborate further, Plotkin writes, caring for the soul of the more than human community has at least 5 components. 1, defending and nurturing the innocence and wonder of children. 2, mentoring and initiating adolescents. 3, mentoring adults in their soul work. 4, guiding the evolution and transformation of culture. And 5, maintaining the balance between human culture and the greater earth community. In doing these things, the master embraces and engenders wholeness. End quote. And it's precisely that very wholeness, the embodiment of it, that is the gift that stage 7 gives to the community. And to give you a taste of what I mean by this, just imagine being in the presence of someone who has nothing left to prove, nothing to defend, nothing to sell you, nothing to perform. Someone who has been through so much dissent, so much grief, so much joy, so much failure, so much love, so much loss, that they have been worn smooth by life the way a river stone is worn smooth by water. Every sharp edge has been rounded, every pretense has been dissolved, and what remains is just them, fully, without apology, without armor, without agenda. And when you sit with this person, something interesting probably happens. Your own defenses start to soften. Your own loyal soldier starts to relax. Not because the elder gave you a technique or a teaching on how to relax your nervous system, but because your nervous system recognizes wholeness, and wholeness feels safe. It's like a primal form of safety from being in the presence of a being who is fully at home in existence itself. And in the presence of that safety, parts of you that have been clenched for years, decades maybe, start to unclench. Something in you softens, your breath deepens, and the elder didn't actually even do anything. They're just sitting there. Maybe they're smiling slightly. Maybe they are looking at you with eyes that have no judgment in them whatsoever, because it's just a vast, warm, all-encompassing, and endlessly patient seeing. And in that seeing, you feel met. You don't feel evaluated. You're not diagnosed. You're not judged. You're just simply met. The whole of you, your light and your shadow, your beauty and your mess, your brilliance and your brokenness, all of it is seen, all of it is welcome, and none of it is a problem to the stage 7 elder. That is wholeness. And that whole depiction I just described of that elder is a completely imaginary scenario, because I myself have never actually met any old people in my life who truly, deeply embody this. I mean, let me know what you think in the comments. Have you known an elder who actually embodies wholeness? Because what happens in our current society, because our society has no structures and virtually no institutions and no encouraging of adult development, we mostly wind up with elderly people who are senile and angry and bitter about how the world is changing, who still hold deeply, deeply conservative values that are just downright harmful in many regards, who are so deeply out of touch both with culture and with themselves that they cannot even truly see the younger generations, and thus they cannot mentor them and guide them in the way that they need to be guided. How it looks now is that it looks like elderly people being warehoused in nursing homes. They're isolated from community. They're stripped of purpose. They're medicated into docility, and they're watching television until they die. And I'm not saying this to be cruel. I'm not trying to even bash old people. I'm saying this because it's a huge fucking tragedy in this, and my heart actually breaks for it, because in our current society with no understanding of or encouragement of adult development, we live within a civilization that has no pathway to genuine elderhood, a civilization that takes its most experienced, most potentially wise members, and they mostly just discard them. Because in a stage 3 adolescent culture, where your value is determined by your productivity and your social utility, the moment you can no longer produce, you become invisible, irrelevant, a burden. And the cruelty of that is not just what it does to the elderly people themselves, it's what it deprives the rest of us of. Because those people, those 70 and 80-year-olds sitting alone in assisted living facilities, or just sitting on their couch angry and bitter about what the liberals are doing, many of them had the potential to be genuine elders. Many of them carried seeds of wisdom that, if they were in a soul-centric culture, would have been cultivated and honored and poured back into the community. But the thing is, nobody ever helped them tend those seeds, the seeds that is their consciousness. Nobody ever initiated them in the first place into true adulthood, so they never even had a chance to be initiated into true elderhood. And so the seed that is their consciousness just dries up. The potential elder just becomes another old person, and the community lost something irreplaceable without even knowing that it was there. And I know I'm certainly biased, by the way, and that there are many amazing, genuine elders out there. I'm not saying there are none at all, but I truly believe that there are very, very few. In my family, with my grandparents, they all voted MAGA. They all voted for Donald fucking Trump. And my grandpa, in his very, very, very ripe old age, is particularly zealous about it too. So that should tell you all you need to know about where they're at. And that doesn't mean I don't love them. It doesn't mean I don't like being around them every now and then, but I have to be honest and say that my life would probably be a lot smoother. I'd feel a lot closer to my family if we weren't in this soul-numbing society that isolates all of us from each other and from nature itself. Like, it's really, really tragic. Like, holy shit. Like, I have actually like cried about this before. I've grieved this because instead of being the wise elders who live and breathe wholeness, who can see you way deeper than you could ever see yourself, actually aiding you in your life path and living and helping you live into your soul's purpose, instead they're just being mobilized by politicians who know exactly how to exploit early adolescent stage 3 fears, fear of the other, fear of the outgroup, fear of change, fear of losing your place in the hierarchy, to consolidate power. The very people who could have been our elders are being weaponized as a political base. And if that doesn't break your heart, then I don't know what will. Yet, on the flip side of this heartbreak, as all heartbreaks tend to do, is I've also found a spark in my heart because of this, a spark that has me looking forward to being an elder myself. And throughout my life, living soul-centrically so that in my bubble, in my family, and in my community, we can at least taste a piece of the more beautiful world our hearts know is possible. I want to be the elder that just radiates wholeness, whom all of my grandchildren love being around, and my other wise elder friends' grandchildren too, where we all live together in a community, close to nature, raising the children together, tending to the land together, celebrating together, grieving together, where the teenagers have elders who can actually deeply understand them and can mirror their own authenticity back to them, and where the kids are running wild in the garden the way they were always meant to. And of course, where the elders are honored, not put in a home, not discarded, not viewed as just an angry old fart, but genuinely honored as the most precious resource the community has, where death is not hidden away in hospitals, but held openly, community as part of the sacred rhythm of life. This world and this way of life is possible. It's completely possible. But of course, it starts with us individuals doing the work, tending to our own development, being the love, being the soul that we are at our core, and giving our gifts to life. That's what we're here for. And I know deep down that you know this. And of course, also to get back to this stage, as one is entering into like much older age, where the body has weakened to a significant degree and there begins to be less of a desire for cultural leadership or really even doing things at all, that's when you enter into stage 8, the sage in the mountain cave, as Bill Plotkin calls it. And it is at this stage that one has more fully made the return to the east cardinal direction at the very place in which their life began. Plotkin lists that there is no task here at this stage. The task is actually a non-task, simply being with what is. And to describe the difference between stage 7 and stage 8, Plotkin writes, as a master, you already possessed and shared a good deal of knowledge and skills to intentionally lead and guide north than it was about a full embrace of the moment and a spontaneous expression of wisdom east. Now, as a sage, your propensity is to celebrate the wondrous and numinous. And he lists the core gift that this stage has to offer the community as grace. Grace is not something you can earn. It's not something you achieve. It's not even a skill you develop or a practice that you master. Grace is what remains when everything else has been released, when the doing is done, when the giving is complete, when the ego has served its purpose, and finally, gently opened its hands and let go. What flows through that open space, that space where striving used to be, where ambition used to be, where even service used to be, is grace. The unmerited, unmanufactured, sheer beauty of a life that has been lived all the way to its completion, now resting in the mystery from which it was born. Plotkin writes, there are at least 4 categories of things that happen in the sage's sphere that nourish and even sustain the world. Number 1, wisdom sharing. Number 2, the coordination of the human realm with the cosmological realm. Number 3, mentoring by means of an enduring imaginal presence. And number 4, preparation for death. And to talk about the wisdom sharing, and notice at this stage, wisdom sharing is qualitatively different from everything that came before. That's at least how Plotkin describes it. The apprentice shared insights. The artisan shared mastery of whatever delivery system they embodied. The elder shared guidance. But the sage shares wisdom, and wisdom is not information. It's not even really knowledge. Wisdom is what's left when information and knowledge have been composted by decades of living into something that can be communicated in a single glance, a single sentence, a single silence. The sage doesn't give lectures. The sage might say one thing, one quiet, strange, seemingly simple thing, and it lands in you like a depth charge that keeps detonating for years because it didn't come from the mind, it didn't come from the ego, it came from the entirety of a whole life. It came from this like deep cosmocentric place. And to talk about the coordination of the human realm with the cosmological realm, and this is like the most mysterious of the four to me, but what I understand Plotkin to be pointing at is the sage, having arrived at a cosmocentric awareness, serves as a kind of bridge between the human world and the larger cosmic unfolding, because the sage perceives patterns and rhythms and movements in reality that are invisible to those of us who are still caught up in the daily drama of human affairs. They can sense when the human community is out of alignment with the deeper currents of the cosmos, the seasons, the cycles, the great archetypal forces that shape existence itself. And their mere presence serves as a subtle corrective, not through intervention, not through instruction, but through attunement. The sage is so attuned to the cosmos that being near them tunes you like a tuning fork. You come into their field and something in you starts to vibrate at a truer frequency. And this is also where just the presence of the sage in your imagination can also have a very powerful impact. This means that the sage doesn't even need to be physically present in order to mentor you, because their image, their essence, their being has become so vivid, so archetypal, so deeply imprinted in the community's imagination that people are mentored by the sage even in the sage's absence, even after the sage has died even, because you carry them with you. You hear the voice in your head when you're making a difficult decision. You feel their presence when you're in the cocoon and you need to know that someone has been through this before. Think about the great sages throughout history whose imaginal presence is still mentoring people centuries after their death. The Buddha, Rumi, Lao Tzu. Their physical bodies are long gone, but their presence still endures, still guiding, still evoking, still blessing. That's the power of a life lived to its full completion. It becomes mythic. It enters the collective imagination as a permanent resource, and anyone who turns toward that resource in any era can drink from its wellspring. And of course, death as well. I think death is actually probably, in my eye, the biggest impact that the sage can have, because the sage, simply by the way they relate to their approaching death, teaches the entire community something that our deeply death-phobic culture desperately needs to learn, that death is not an enemy, that death is not a bad thing. There's nothing to fear about death. Death is just the final threshold within this human life. And the sage, having crossed so many thresholds already, having died so many deaths throughout the course of the wheel, the death of innocence, the death of the adolescent self, the death of the loyal soldier, the countless ego surrenders of decades of soul service, the sage meets this final death not with fear, but with something that looks remarkably like the infant's original tenderness, going on into the afterlife with a willingness that says, I have given everything I came here to give. I have been everything I came here to be, and now I return to the mystery from which I arose. And in dying this way, consciously, openly, gracefully, the sage gives one last gift to the community. They model death. They show everyone watching that a human being can die well, that death can be beautiful and completely painless, with no suffering whatsoever. Only grace. And in a culture that is absolutely terrified of death, that does everything in its power to avoid even thinking about death, this modeling is perhaps the most countercultural and most necessary act of the sage's entire life. And here the wheel completes itself. East at birth and east at death, and everything in between, the exploration, the adolescent fire, the descent to soul, the soul encounter, the decades of service, the giving away of wisdom, all of it was the great arc of consciousness becoming aware of itself, only to release that awareness back into the vastness from which it came. The sun that rose in the east returns to the east, and the cycle continues. And that is the 8 stages of nature-based, soul-centric human development, according to psychologist Bill Plotkin. And I must say, as someone who has read hundreds of psychology and spirituality books, who has studied human development very, extensively that this is my very favorite model of human development. To me, it feels like the most intuitive, and it's also much different than the other models of development, such as the Kohlbergs, the Piagets, even the Ken Wilber models, and the spiral dynamics model, because it's the only model of development that describes what human life is like once we re-indigenize ourselves. None of the other models of development acknowledge the fact that, as a species, we've become divorced from our own souls because we've become separated from nature, hypnotized by egoic forces in this industrial growth society. Spiral dynamics maps cultural values. Ken Wilber, in a lot of ways, has an emphasis on both cognitive understanding and spiritual awareness, but this Bill Plotkin model is a nature-based, full-spectrum model that is simultaneously a model of human development, but it's also taking you on a heroic, mythic journey of what a human life looks like. And this all just feels like very intuitive to me. I enjoyed the process of reading this book way more than I enjoyed reading other developmental theory. And so I'm going to repeat this again because it's so important. Our task as humans is to re-indigenize ourselves, to become a healthy, functioning member of the earth, rather than a rogue, pathological cancer cell that is actively destroying the whole through humanity's current war and genocides and destroying of the environment, life, and the biosphere as a whole. The only way we're going to do it, that we're going to make it and thrive as a species in the long run, is if we learn to become one with the earth again, learn how to live in harmony with her patterns, and become one again by re-indigenizing ourselves. And re-indigenizing ourselves doesn't mean we go back to living in caves or that we reject modern technology or pretending the last 500 years of human development didn't happen. Rather, it means remembering that we are of the earth. We are not separate from it. It means realizing what it's like to live sustainably, to actually care for and protect the earth herself. It means realizing how to embody love. It means remembering that our psyches are as wild and as layered and as intelligent as the ecosystems that we evolved within and from. It means remembering that soul is not a metaphor or a religious, airy-fairy spiritual concept, but is a genuine ecological reality. Your unique niche in the web of life, the specific gift that the earth herself is waiting for you to deliver to all of us. Because we need you. Nature needs you. Nature cannot complete itself without your soul. For your soul has a gift that makes the world more beautiful, whole, and complete because you are in it. So, if you've made it to the point in this video, my friend, I just want to say a genuine thank you. Please drop a comment in the comment section about what you thought of this. And the last thing I'll say here is a short bit about how you can actually use this model to actually help your own development unfold. So what really holds all of us back, right, is our ego being hijacked by it. Our inner loyal soldier that has been molded and shaped by culture that has taken on a unique set of behavioral patterns, belief systems, and thought processes in order to fit in, to survive physically and socially. And it's always whenever this loyal soldier has a stranglehold on our psyche that our inner experience becomes so tight and so constricted to the point that our soul, our deepest nature, cannot come through. And so the first step, wherever you find yourself on the map, is to just try, to the very best of your ability, to just be. Be in a relaxed, open, being and allowing orientation where you are genuinely open to what wants to emerge through you. Develop a keen awareness of when your loyal soldier, or any part of your protective ego, is fearful and closes down certain aspects of your experience. Do as many practices as you can to get in touch with your depths. Go be in nature, deep nature. Go get away from the noise and the hustle and bustle of this current modern human culture. Take up a meditation practice. Start finding more and more avenues to express your depths through your deep creativity, because what we want is to open as many doors as possible in order for soul to come through. We both want to open up new doors to soul, but we also, again, like I said, to safely and intentionally learn how to also embody a more open and flexible ego, which provides a spacious place for soul to emerge. And this is precisely why I created the Soul Emergence Collective. The Soul Emergence Collective is a community that I created that is designed for this one very purpose, for your soul to emerge. We do group calls every week where we talk about what we're moving through, how to support each other, and engage in relational practices to deepen into our soul. We also have meditation hour every single week to provide a space for whatever wants to come up, train the muscle of loving awareness, a muscle that is needed in order to love all parts of ourselves, that allows us to open to the more spacious place that soul needs in order to emerge. There's also a course that I created that includes over 30 hours of video content that is all about how to both discover and embody your soul. I really hope to see you there. And also, if you are desiring a more intentional container to do this work, to grow down into who you truly are, and to live that fully and completely, I do have a couple slots open for one-to-one coaching. Links to both of those will be in the description and in the comment section. And yeah, wherever it is, however it is, I hope to see you soon. So also, please like the video if you made it this far. The algorithm boost really helps. And that's it for today, guys. I sincerely hope you enjoyed. Have a great day, and peace.